For those sitting at the U, if you are using a microphone, you need to hold it down while you're speaking. And the restrooms are just straight out directly out of the entrance here, straight ahead with water fountains. And we have plenty of beverages here for those to enjoy. And I think that is what I have. Yes.
Demonstrate it.
You can click it.
Normally you
Is,
could.
Got it.
This
Thank
is-
you.
Do we know the status of Michelle and Devereaux?
Deborah will be arriving later this morning.
All right, well, because we are running a couple of minutes late, I'll start or open this meeting of the Napa Valley Transportation Authority Board of Directors Tax Agency, NVTA-TA. First up, we'll do a Pledge of Allegiance. All right, next we'll do a roll call, please.
Scott Sedgley. Bernie Narvaez. Liz Alessio. Amber Manfrey. Mark Joseph. Pierre Washington.
Here.
Margie Muller. Confirmed absence from Margie Muller. Robin McKee. Paul Doring. Michelle Deasy. Donald Williams. Kevin Eisenberg. We do have a quorum.
Perfect, thank you. Next, we'll adopt the agenda, which consists of 2 consent items.
Move to adopt.
McKee and Alessio, McKee moved, Alessio seconded. Can we just do a all in favor? Okay, all in favor. Any opposed? Okay, motion carries. Next, public comment. Anyone who'd like to talk about the tax authority is welcome to come on up and talk. Okay, no one's there, so we're going to go to chairperson and board members updates. Chair, or, well, I don't have any board members. Okay, executive director report, no report. All right, then we're ready for the consent item. I'll take a motion.
So moved, Alessio.
Alessi, and Bernie. So we have a motion and second. All those in favor say aye. Any opposed? All right. No regular agenda items. Any future agenda items that a director would like to bring up? Okay, then I'm going to call it, this meeting's adjourned at 11:09. Next, we're going to open up the NVTA regular agency minutes or board. We'll call it to order at 11:10. And I think we're covered on the roll call.
I can confirm roll call was confirmed at the preceding NVTA tax agency meeting with 2 absences.
Okay. Adoption of the agenda, which again is mostly just consent items, but 1 regular. So any changes to the agenda? All right, a motion to adopt it, please.
I'll second.
McKee,
Second Washington.
Ugh, this is a nuisance. Washington seconds. All those in favor say aye. Any opposed? All right. Any public comment? This one's a more exciting agency. You might have comments about the authority versus the tax agency.
Chair, we do have submitted comments. Please come.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you. Are there any other public comments? And then we'll move on to chairperson, board members, MTC and ABAG updates. Again, none from me. Any board members? Any MTC representatives and ABAG? Okay, no reports. Good. Oh, I'm sorry.
Sorry, I can run through a couple things. As the Metropolitan Transportation Commission appointee for Napa County, we have met recently, and I've also received my committee assignments. So I am representing Napa County on the Bay Area Housing Finance Authority, Bay Area Toll Authority, Programming and Allocations Committee, and the Mega Region Working Group. Let's see what is relevant here. Maybe MTC has opened up a solicitation period for new priority conservation areas, and this will designate areas that might be eligible for future funding through the PCA grant program. The window is open through May 2nd this year. There was a lot of discussion over whether or not to support AB 697, which would allow State Route 37 corridor improvements to bypass the NEPA and go under CEQA instead, or California Endangered Species Act instead, I'm sorry. And that passed. There was a lot of discussion though. I just want to make sure that's clear. And the city of Napa received 2 grants, one for almost $1 million for charging infrastructure and one for $500,000 for parking management. And the Mega Region Working Group is very interesting. I don't know if it has a lot of relevance to Napa County because it's mostly for smart rail and big, huge infrastructure projects on major state highways, but it's good work. And if anyone wants to hear more about that or anything else I might have been learning, please come talk to me. Thank you.
Thank you. And to clarify, MTC ultimately endorsed AB 697? Okay, thanks. Anything from ABAG?
Nothing to report.
Okay, then we're on to Executive Director's report.
Good morning. Let's see. I first would like to thank Redwood Credit Union for graciously accommodating our retreat today. It's a nice space. They've been wonderful to work with. NVTA is currently recruiting for 2 positions, an accountant position and a planner project manager position. And then on meetings and events, NVTA tabled at the Earth Day celebration on April 12th. Special thanks to staff members Jimena Espinosa, Dexter Cypress, Renelle Coombs, Diana Meehan, and Danielle Schmitz for representing the agency and the work that we do at the event. Also shout out to Directors Alessio, Manfrey, and Narvaez for attending the event and stopping by our table. We really appreciate it. NVTA is also holding a community outreach meeting to elicit feedback from the community members about improvements on State Route 29 in American Canyon. This will inform the project environmental document. The meeting is on April 30th at the American Canyon City Hall. We'll begin at 5:30 and conclude at 7. NVT is a sponsor and is tabling at the May 4th Bike Fest event, which will be held at the South Napa Marketplace from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. We encourage board members to come by. Members of the public really appreciate having the opportunity to share their concerns and issues with you, and it really puts a face on the agency, so we really appreciate your support there. On May 16th, it's Bike to Wherever Day around the Bay Area and also here in Napa. NVTA will sponsor a morning energizer station near the Vine Trail on Soskull at Vallejo Street. And we encourage you to come by with your bikes. That would be fun to see you. NVTA is planning a number of meetings as part of the Community-Based Transportation Plan outreach. Otherwise known as the CBTP, is an effort that NVTA completes about every 4 to 5 years, and it focuses on equity priority communities to better understand the specific transportation needs of those communities. So on Tuesday, April 29th from 2 to 4, we'll be at Rolfs Manor. And on Wednesday, May 21st from 12 to 2, we'll be at Calistoga Community Center for the Up Valley Family Center's Lunch and Learn. NVTA staff will be tabling at the Farmers Market downtown on Saturday, May 24th and Saturday, August 2nd from 8 to 12, in part to promote our summer youth program. The Summer Youth Pass provides a summer-long pass to youth for just $20 for the entire summer. And then NVTA is rolling out a new 6-month pilot program on May 1st. This is very exciting news. We've dubbed it Vine Late Night. It's a partnership with Uber and is funded in part by Visit Napa Valley. For employers that sign up for the program, their employees will be eligible for a $10 Uber certificate to get home after Vine service hours if they have used transit to get to work. The program will be geofenced for employers located between on the north and south side, Oak to Lincoln, and on the east and west side, Silverado to Jefferson. And in the city of Napa, we'll also have a few select hotels outside that geofenced area. I'd like to acknowledge Danielle Schmitz and Rebecca Shank, who worked with Uber to develop the idea, and for reaching out to business organizations in Napa to raise revenues to support the program. And I especially like to thank Lindsay Gallagher and her team at Visit Napa Valley for this generous contribution. And that concludes my report.
All right, thank you. The Vine Late Night does sound kind of interesting, so that'd be cool. Now we're on to consent agenda items. There are a number of consent items. Unless anyone wants to pull them for further discussion, I'll entertain a motion to approve them.
Just have a brief question on item 7.
Let's pull item 7.5, but can I have a motion to approve items 7.1, 7.2, 7.3, 7.4?
So moved by Alessio.
Thank you. All right. Okay. Yep. All right. So Director Alessio motioned and Williams seconded. All those in favor say aye for. Okay. All right. Any opposed? All right. Then let's talk about item 7.5. Napa Valley Transportation Authority Agreement number 25C22 with Brightview Landscape Services for landscape maintenance services.
I'll just get my question out. It's a brief question. You can question. So the ultimate award went to a company that was slightly higher than the second company. And I was just wondering what other factors were involved in making the decision to go with a little bit of a higher bidder, unless I'm misunderstanding the award between number 1 and number 2. I thought there may be other factors besides price. Maybe I'm misunderstanding the staff report.
Answer the question specifically, but I can tell you a little bit about how our procurement process works. We have a panel to assess the bids, and pricing is only one score, and it could be they just overall received a higher score, even considering the pricing. And I'm assuming that's what's going on, but I wasn't part of that panel, and I don't. Rebecca, were you part of the panel? Okay. So, Rebecca, maybe you can respond specifically.
Sorry, not realizing that in terms of what we were looking at, as Kate said, there were many factors in terms of what we were looking at. I think specifically when we were looking at Brightview Landscaping, we were looking at some of their other clients, for example, our prior experience with Brightview Landscaping. And then there was also some discrepancy. They just show the full bid amount, but there was some variation in terms of the years and what that would mean. So Brightview was going to cover a little bit longer time compared with the new image much landscaping. But the biggest factor, as Kate mentioned in the beginning, was just that there were multiple bidders and other things that went into it besides the low price. Sure.
Go ahead.
Thank you. My question is on page 62, the very final page, the cost sheet, the summary sheet. What are the number of units based on? And for each of the transit center and maintenance facility, et cetera, it says year 1, year 2, and then it goes back to year 1, 2, 3. So just not being a planner, I just wanted to make sure I understood this.
Oh,
Well, answer that.
okay.
So the number of units is basically the weeks. So 52 units, so weekly service, 52 weeks in a year. And also this was for, so how we approached this contract was a base year of 2 years as the base, and then 3 option years. So a total of 5 years for the contractual term of the agreement.
Thank you.
I'm not sure if there are any other questions, but I'll move approval of the item.
Okay. Okay, Narvaez seconded. Doring motion, Narvaez seconded to move with 7-5. All those in favor say aye. Any opposed? Okay, that motion or that item approved. We are now moving to regular agenda items, which is our board retreat. And I will turn it over to someone who's in charge. And
God, this is,
Laura, you know that Michelle has made it here.
no, it's okay.
Okay,
I just feel like.
all right. So we have almost a full staff.
So we're going to go ahead and start our presentation. And I'm going to kick it off with just sort of an overview of sort of the process that we undergo every 4 to 5 years when we develop the Countywide Transportation Plan. The plan meets the requirements of our funding agency, but it also provides us a compass to meet the goals and objectives and transportation priorities for the next 25 years. Yeah, that might be easier. Test. Okay. There you go. Historically, NVTA has themed its plans to reflect the current policy considerations, but the plans are always focused on primary responsibility, which is to improve mobility for the residents, workers, and visitors of Napa County and reduce the environmental impacts of the transportation sector. The last plan was adopted by the NVTA Board in May of 2021, and it was focused on innovation and technology. And we embraced new concepts. You can go to, yeah, there you go. We embraced new concepts for intersection designs, such as Soskel Junction. We adopted new fuel technologies, investing in zero-emission buses and introducing a state-of-the-art bind maintenance facility that can fuel electric buses and accommodate hydrogen vehicles. We embraced apps, upgrading information to our customer, improve our customer knowledge and improve alternative commute modes like carpooling and transit. And we invested in dynamic signal technologies and introduced transit signal priority. We also invested in active transportation modes like the Vine Trail connection between Calistoga and St. Helena, and developed plans to improve safety in our Vision Zero plan, fostering the current boom in roadway safety improvements around the valley. We also, and I'm just going to deviate a little bit just because I don't want to ignore this, but we also are in the process of completing the accessible needs transportation assessment. We also passed Measure U, which was a huge milestone. And we also built the Vine Trail, which I'm going to talk about a little bit. I didn't see these slides when I wrote my notes, so well, you can go to the next slide. Maybe I had them in my mind. The current plan, Intersections 2050, is expected to be adopted in April 2026. The plan will focus on improving the connections between transportation and land use. Effective integration of transportation and land use planning can create sustainable, efficient, and equitable urban environments. Collaborative approaches that involve stakeholders can also enhance outcomes for the communities. Intersection 2050 will investigate opportunities to strengthen the transportation and land use relationship in an effort to improve mobility and reduce household costs for our residents, our workers, and to create jobs and promote economic growth. Reduce emissions and increase the utility of the Vine transit system. Our funding partners are beginning to recognize that housing and other mixed-use development near transit can also help revive transit systems, and depending on the development approach, mixed-use development can generate additional revenue streams to enhance transit, making it more effective for the community at large. Our funding partners are developing policy goals and funding programs, and NVTA and its jurisdictions need to prepare for these opportunities and funding trends. We have already started working in this arena and investigated how we can develop NVTA's existing land to improve the transportation land use connection. We have also embarked on a study to evaluate the rail connection between the Vallejo Ferry and downtown Napa. In addition, NVTA staff recently applied for a Sustainable Communities grant to plan for the rail station in American Canyon that would serve both the east-west SMART connection and the north-south Ferry Napa rail connection. The plan will not only look at the station, but will be an expanded plan to look at the mixed-use development or potential, integrating commercial development with housing, and evaluate how we can improve road and active transportation circulation in the area. Staff is also very aware that we need to balance development with preserving Napa County's natural beauty, ag and winemaking culture that is essential for tourism and our economic well-being. We're optimistic that we can accomplish this through common sense development, creating affordable housing for our workforce, making transit and active transportation infrastructure more accessible, and reducing traffic. So with that, I'd like to introduce the consultant team and the speakers today. So from Fair and Pierce, we have Bob Grandy, Principal Project Manager for the County Transportation Plan. We have Ashley Takushi, Senior Transportation Engineer, Safety Planning Lead, and Bonnie Nelson, who is our retreat facilitator, and Dave Vaughton, Director of Regional Planning MTC's from MTC, who is today's speaker. And with that, I'm going to hand over the mic to Diana, NVTA's Principal Planner.
Is this on? Hello. Good morning, everybody. Thanks for being here. We really appreciate you carving out the time. We've got a full agenda for today. You can go to the next slide, Laura. I'm going to briefly walk you through kind of what the process is for today and what our retreat objectives are. You'll hear from Dave Vaughton from MTC, our partner, right after me. We'll take a short lunch break after that. Make sure you have all your nutrition on board and ready to go because we've got a full agenda after that. You can go to the next slide, Laura. These are a few of the goals for today. You know, transportation is one of those things that community requires on all levels, but also one that they don't typically think about other than when something isn't functionally working. Whether it be due to congestion, road conditions, long commutes, lack of a safe bike route or crossing to get to where they're going. We'll be looking out 25 years into the future, into 2050, which sounds like a really long time from now. But we need to address those transportation needs and issues for our communities. We have to be foresightful when we're looking out regarding transportation. You're here today in partnership with us, so we can coordinate these priorities. We have to address transportation and land use together as a unit. They go together. We can't actively talk about one without the other. And we're moving forward through this countywide transportation plan. We will be thinking of them as a unit, as simultaneously. We can't achieve our goals unless we can compete well for highly competitive grant funding. Our formula funds that we get in the area are very, very small, where most of those are related to population. I think we're less than 140,000 countywide. To be competitive in the grant funding world, we have to have a good countywide plan that looks out into the future. When we do achieve our funding, our partnerships are necessary to bring the programs and projects through to the finish line, whether it's economic development, Caltrans, Public Works, our city managers, all of you are elected officials. We need all hands on deck to achieve these goals. Next slide, please. This is a snapshot of upcoming key milestones as we walk through the process of the Countywide Transportation Plan. We'll need your help getting the word out to our community as we plan for our first public workshop in June. We'll launch a call for projects with all jurisdictions in July. It's imperative that the projects we desire to complete are listed in the CTP, the Countywide Transportation Plan. That's what feeds the regional plan. In the fall, we'll host a second set of workshops to ensure that we're on the right path. We'll be reaching out to the community once we start assembling all the components of the plan, just to ensure we're addressing the needs of the community. By December, we'll have a draft plan for your review and members of the public. And finally, we'll finalize all the details, and the goal is to adopt the plan in April 2026 in alignment with the next iteration of Plan Bay Area, which you'll be hearing more about later today. Next slide, please. You know, as Kate mentioned, we've got several other parallel planning processes going on simultaneously. This is a first for NVTA. They're typically spread out in this time point, and I think COVID had a little bit to do with that. We are all hands on deck with multiple transportation plans that all support and inform and feed the countywide transportation plan. So the accessible transportation needs assessment is one that we're just wrapping up, and that looks at the needs for seniors and transportation needs for seniors and individuals with disabilities. We're developing a countywide active transportation plan. It's the first time we've ever combined both the bike and pedestrian plan into a holistic plan that looks at all needs for more connected mobility and safer walking and biking, as you heard the commenters talk about earlier today. Our community-based transportation plan targets identified equity priority communities, typically underserved, and addresses their transportation needs from their perspective and their concerns. Finally, the update of the travel behavior study, which is always one that informs our countywide transportation plan, looks at travel patterns and how we address and prioritize our transportation needs. And you'll hear a little bit more about that today. Next slide, please. With that, you'll be hearing from Dave Vaughton on key policy issues and how we can solve some of these challenging transportation issues both locally and regionally. You'll hear about changes that have developed since the last transportation plan, which was in 2021. And as I said, the nexus between land uses and the importance of addressing both simultaneously. You'll have the opportunity to review the previous plan vision and goals and weigh in on key themes from then. And at the end of our program, we will make sure we have adequate time to hear from our audience today. Thank you all for being here. And with that, I'm going to pass the mic over to Dave Vaughton, Director of Regional Planning with MTC.
Good morning, everybody, and thanks for having me here. As was mentioned, I'm Dave Vaughton. I'm Planning Director with the Metropolitan Transportation Commission and the Association of Bay Area Governments. And it's always exciting to join for the kickoff of a new plan. Maybe that's just because I am a planner and I love working on these sorts of things, and especially one up here in Napa. Let's go here. Oh, can we load up the slides, please? While they're doing that, let me just briefly introduce the two regional agencies that I work for. Okay, there we go. MTC and ABAG, which were both established in the 1960s. So just a little background for those of you who maybe are a little less aware of regional government. MTC is a metropolitan planning organization. It was created by the federal and state governments and is responsible for planning, funding, and delivering in the transportation space. We also work for ABAG, the Council of Governments, which is really a creature of local governments coming together to address key issue areas like housing, land use, and the environment. And over the decades, these two agencies have worked closer and closer together to serve the diverse 101 cities and towns, as well as the 9 counties that comprise the San Francisco Bay Area, which now has nearly 8 million people. We work together with a shared mission and vision. I don't think I was necessarily invited today to talk all about the dynamics of regional government. I wanted to put on a little different hat, at least for the start of this presentation. I spent the last 15 years co-creating and implementing long-range plans of all types, and wanted to share a few big ideas and some reflections as you embark on this effort. When I coach young people when they're thinking of joining the planning profession, I often note that there's different types of plans. Just like this speedboat in the upper left corner, the day-to-day operations offers a lot of rewards in terms of seeing things on the ground very quickly. But long-range planning is satisfying in its own way. In the same way that an aircraft carrier can't turn on a dime, long-range planning pays off over time and can actually be more powerful at delivering results. And so as we think about these different complementary efforts of the day-to-day work of delivering and the long-range planning, there's an opportunity for a long-range plan to yield transformative change if it sets the right foundation. My presentation is structured around 4 key questions. Why develop or update a long-range plan? Why is it worthwhile to think beyond transportation? Why is it valuable to perhaps think not just locally, but regionally? And finally, how can we at the regional scale help you all implement this vision? So let's start with the first one. Why develop or update a long-range plan? Well, this might seem obvious, but there are some good lessons learned that we've seen about what makes a plan like this one successful. You know, I think it's really easy to get cynical about the value of plans. If you've ever walked around a government office, you've probably seen a giant bookshelf full of plans from decades past, sometimes covered in a little bit of dust. And I think the question that we should ask ourselves is, how can one create a great plan that meets the moment? Because there are some plans that really do that. One lesson that we've learned over the years is it's really about focusing and having a clear outcome in mind, and a realization that as the public, as stakeholders, and as a board coming together, that the process often yields what you put into it. The input, yields that output. I work at the regional scale with all 9 counties and 101 cities. So we see dozens or even hundreds of different plans come across our desks in a given year. It might be a county transportation plan like this one, or a specific plan for new development in a town, or a state policy plan, or many other types of plans. But over the years, what I've learned is that great plans tend to have 3 common ingredients. They have a clear vision and clear objectives. They wrestle with tough trade-offs and financial constraints, and they prioritize linking those priorities to implementation. When plans wave away those success factors, they tend to not, necessarily meet the needs of the moment or serve the entity in the long term. Maybe they're being designed to fulfill bureaucratic requirements, or they assume infinite resources, or they establish such a long list of priorities that they're impossible to implement. So keeping in mind those 3 lenses is really important when creating a successful long-range plan. But what's exciting is when a plan does meet the moment, it can serve as a blueprint for decades to come. This BART map is back from the 1980s. And in fact, when you look at all of the detail on the map, it actually reflects all of the projects many of the projects that BART has built out in the sequence they were built out over the last 40 years. For better or worse, the infrastructure investments that we plan in long-range plans take many years or even decades to realize, in part due to the challenges of project delivery in California and across the United States. And this means that the upfront planning is even more important now than it was in the past, because the time to deliver is so long. It's also important for plans to delineate the right priorities to meet community needs, as the next generation must live with the consequences. This image is a classic from any urban planning school. It shows two equally sized areas, one an interchange in metropolitan Atlanta and one the city center of Florence, Italy. They both consume the same amount of land, but they have expressed radically different values about how to use it. Neither of these places is like Napa County, but the point is clear. The decisions that we make in any plan have consequences decades, or I guess in the case of Florence, even centuries to come. Now we see these sort of historical threads here in the Bay Area as well. You know, the South Bay in the early 20th century was not too dissimilar from the North Bay today. It was a primarily agricultural place. Its population was even quite similar to Napa County today. Acres of fruit orchards surrounded then small town centers in places like San Jose. But as the Bay Area expanded post-World War II, the South Bay made a decision to forego participation in the BART system and lean into constructing highways similar to Southern California. And this shaped the land use pattern of the entire valley and created the transportation challenges we face today. Now, of course, some of those decisions laid out in their long-range plans came with pluses and minuses. They were able to benefit from the technology boom and became a global center of innovation, but they lost their agricultural heritage along the way, and it generated big challenges like traffic congestion, automobile dependency, and environmental impacts. Now, the South Bay story is very different than the North Bay story. Now, Napa did lose its interurban rail services after World War II, and the fingerprints of 20th century decisions still remain in terms of many, the road network that we have today. But the county wisely managed to push back on Caltrans' aim to turn Highway 29 into a freeway throughout much of the valley that would have constructed interchanges in the middle of vineyards. This preserved the character of the towns and cities in the county and protected green spaces for agriculture and for recreation, as shown in this satellite image that looks nearly identical in one century and in the next. While targeted road improvements have been made in places like the city of Napa, as well as Highway 12 connecting to Solano County, those choices to have a lighter footprint in terms of the transportation investment made by prior generations of elected officials has shaped the county into what it is today, compact towns surrounded by green spaces. This presents opportunities. That compact nature of each of the city's unique cities and each of the county's unique cities and towns creates opportunities to think about how to support short distance trips, walking and biking within those communities. And that compact nature also makes it easier for transit services to connect the cities and towns to each other without requiring multiple transfers. Well, there's no one right answer in terms of how to invest in transportation. What I wanted to underscore today is that the decisions made in these plans actually does matter, and it shapes the future course of your towns, your cities, and the county at large. As you start working on this county transportation plan, I want to encourage you not to let the plan become siloed only in the world of transportation. I think as elected officials, you may be even more aware than us as planners that transportation does not live in a vacuum. The decisions on economic development, the environment, housing, land use, they all impact and are impacted by transportation decisions. Transportation is effective if they treat transportation as the singular or central goal. And we've pivoted as a profession to thinking about mobility more as a means to an end, about getting from A to B, for job opportunities, for social connections, to serve the other areas that. Sorry. Oh. Thank you. But really, transportation is designed to serve other policy areas. In this redevelopment picture, it gives you a sense of how those solutions can be beyond transportation, but involve transportation investments. Say we want to have better access to healthy food. Maybe if we think about that as the core goal, we can come up with solutions that include transportation, but also other policy areas. In this case, the community, instead of trying to widen a road to get better access to the grocery store, worked to create a local market as part of that new development, and then made investments in walkable streets to enable more people to pick up their groceries close to home. One of the biggest lessons learned for planners during the pandemic was the value of creating these great spaces for humans and not letting the perfect become the enemy of the good. And given that these big infrastructure projects, which are exciting but take years and decades to deliver, creative solutions may be a way to think about delivering things a little more cheaply and a little faster. So how do we create these great spaces for current and future generations? It's really about thinking about transportation as one piece of the puzzle to stand up a metaphorical stool that creates great places. We pair that with land use and housing and environmental policies to make it work. Now, turning a little bit more to the policy side of this, this has become the norm at the regional scale. Before 2008, our regional plan was once known as the Regional Transportation Plan, or RTP. Senate Bill 375 was passed, and that shifted the whole paradigm for how we do planning. Instead of thinking about it as a regional transportation plan, we began thinking about it as a regional plan writ large, connecting the dots between land use, the environment, and transportation. We also learned through that shift a few key lessons. And this was by the rapidly rise of building things in the transportation space. We quickly realized that prior plans' focus on transportation projects had a key flaw. Given how long that they take to build and how expensive they are, we realized we could not move the needle towards the plan's ambitious goals by simply building new things. We needed to emphasize policy and programs as more central components to our long-range vision, given their higher impact and lower costs. This changed how we plan, fund, and deliver at the regional scale here in the Bay Area, shifting a bit away from large-scale mega projects and more towards grants that can help communities grow and thrive. The One Bay Area Grant Program, which is known also as OBEG, helps to fund these neighborhood-scale planning efforts and help us boost investments in those lower-cost improvements like active transportation. While this plan is indeed transportation focused, I encourage you to look at linkages to parallel local land use plans, linkages to efforts on the county and regional scale in order to fund the most high impact investments. So why think regionally? As you're going to see in some of the data from the consultant team later today, most trips do start and end here in Napa County, and that does mean it's critical to make investments that serve local and intra-county trips. But there are indeed many folks who commute in and out of the county, and of course, for key destinations and amenities, a trip to other Bay Area counties or beyond is essential, like heading to the airport. While each town, city, and county is unique in our region, many of the challenges being faced here in Napa County are indeed shared with other jurisdictions. Sea level rise, wildfires, these things pose threats to numerous communities, and they certainly don't stop when they see a jurisdictional line. Trips often traverse across multiple counties, and when folks do need to transfer to a different transit operator, we want those connections to be as seamless as possible. Regional connectivity has also been increasingly important as the housing crisis affects the residents of this county and beyond. Many lower wage workers must commute in from Solano County or even points further east. And this has created new pressures on the transportation system as a result of the challenges and the other aspects of planning. Thinking regionally is also important in terms of exploring funding opportunities. Of course, there's local sales tax monies that help to implement your county transportation plan, but opportunities exist beyond the county scale. Regional grant programs, state discretionary funds, these sources are key in terms of funding the full suite of improvements that you'd like to make. Through groups like the Bay Area Partnership, we closely collaborate with NVTA, Caltrans, and other counties and transit operators throughout the Bay Area. Plans like Napa's County Transportation Plan also serve as critical pieces of the puzzle when we craft the transportation element of our regional plan, Plan Bay Area. We look to these plans alongside general plans, local land use plans from cities, towns, and counties, as well as environmental plans like shoreline adaptation plans and park plans. This is critical data on local priorities that helps us create a firm foundation for a broadly shared regional vision. Now, every 4 years, MTC and ABAG update Plan Bay Area to serve as that vision, addressing issues including transportation, housing, economic development, and the environment across all 9 counties and 101 cities. It's been updated several times since the initial adoption in 2013, and we're on track to adopt it again in early 2026 with refreshed strategies upon the completion of the CEQA process. That iteration, Plan Bay Area 2050 Plus, continues our focus on the plan's vision to ensure that the Bay Area is more affordable, connected, diverse, healthy, and vibrant for all. It leans in on 35 strategies that nest into 11 key themes. Our long-range plan for the Bay Area focuses on maintaining and optimizing our existing transportation system, creating healthy and safe streets while building out a next-generation transit network. And in the housing space, focuses on the 3 Ps of housing: protection, preservation, and production at all income levels, while creating inclusive communities. In the economic space, the plan includes strategies for economic mobility and trying to better align the location of jobs and housing, as well as in the environmental space, reducing the risk from hazards, expanding access to parks and recreation, and of course, reducing climate emissions. It also includes a focused growth land use framework that lifts up locally identified and regionally designated places for new housing and jobs. This is essential to minimize development outside of urban growth boundaries. This map here shows a snapshot of the northern part of the Bay Area, but there's of course much more information on this long-range plan on planbayarea.org. While we are finishing this targeted update to Plan Bay Area in the coming months, this county transportation plan can help shape aspects of Plan Bay Area 2060, a major refresh anticipated to start next year. Our major updates to the regional vision are synced with the famous, or some might say infamous, RENA process, which, while unrelated to transportation, attracts significant attention given its 8-year cadence and its linkage to housing elements. I wanted to conclude by highlighting a few key policy topics that you may want to think about as you shape this CTP. These are issues that are critical at both the regional and statewide scales. And importantly, underscore that for each of these, that MTC and ABAG are here to help with funding and technical assistance. MTC's Transit-Oriented Communities Policy, or TOC policy, is a flagship implementation vehicle of Plan Bay Area and was adopted in 2022. It goes into effect next year. If I was giving this talk in most other counties in the Bay Area, I would have spent many of the slides on this topic, given that it affects the majority of jurisdictions within the region. However, in Napa County, all jurisdictions are exempt from the policy because it only applies to places that have rail, ferry, or bus rapid transit service. That being said, the policy offers opportunities for jurisdictions to volunteer to become a transit-oriented community and unlock funding opportunities for transit-oriented community implementation. If that proves to be an interest area for any Napa County jurisdictions in the years ahead, it may be worthwhile to think about how this plan can lay the groundwork in terms of transportation investments and transportation policy in areas like active transportation or parking. MTC and ABAG also continue to support locally nominated priority development areas, priority production areas, and priority conservation areas with separate grant programs, as well as technical assistance. While of course this is a transportation planning process and would not necessarily nominate any new places for growth or for protection, thinking about how to align your transportation investments with predetermined places for growth as well as places to protect is key. As was mentioned earlier, equity priority communities is another key tool and framework you might want to consider with this process. It uses census data to identify places with high concentrations of low-income residents and communities of color. And it's key to advancing social equity and environmental justice. Of course, this is a complex time to be making progress on equity goals, but to the extent these remain a priority for you and the residents you represent, the EPC framework is a good tool and mapping framework to ensure monies are being prioritized for the people most in need. And as was mentioned earlier, the One Bay Area Grant Program also helps fund those community-based transportation plans, and in the future, increased implementation of those plans. Vision Zero, also a framework both at the regional and state level that has taken a lot of priority in recent years. You know, before the pandemic, in a typical year, there would be more than a dozen folks killed on the roads of Napa County alone and hundreds of people killed across the Bay Area. Capital investments are only a small part of the solution on the safety side. They need to be paired again with policies and programs like school crossing guards or speed limit adjustments. And of course, this is an area where there's broad, bipartisan agreement about the importance of the work here. MTC did recently secure a Safe Streets for All grant from the federal government, totaling $10 million that we hope to be able to use to support local implementation in this space. Two final topics to spotlight, as I know I'm the only thing between you and lunch. Climate initiatives, such as electric vehicle chargers, are key also to reducing greenhouse gas emissions. And of course, California has incredibly ambitious goals in this space. MTC has traditionally allocated grant monies towards this purpose. In fact, just in the last few months, awarded monies for electric vehicle chargers throughout the region, as well as complementary climate investments. Those were approved by the commission. But we anticipate there'll be more opportunities in that space in the years to come. And we know that these are investments that are popular with the public and align with state policy. And last but certainly not least, transit transformation has become a major theme post-pandemic across the region as we work to make the system faster, safer, cleaner, and more reliable. Efforts like the Bus Aid program that MTC leads help operators fund transit priority investments that are right-sized for the local context, with more funding anticipated in the next few years to deliver in this space. I think the bottom line I want to underscore is that there's a lot of interesting policy lenses, as was noted, to explore in this CTP effort. And despite all of the federal headwinds that we're hearing a lot about, there are monies available at various levels of government to help bring your plan to life. And so building a plan with a firm foundation to connect to that implementation is going to be key. So thanks again for having me this morning. And of course, I'll be happy to take any questions about what's happening at the regional or statewide scale. And best of luck to all of you as you shape this refreshed vision for transportation here in Napa County.
All right, well, thank you very much. Does the board have any questions? Okay, Director Alessio.
Thank you for that, that presentation. That was really exciting. I love that. It really marries well with the City of Napa's general plan, and it really connects with public health and population health. So we have to be holistic. We have to look at the whole, and you shared that very well. So thank you for that. There was a slide, and I was trying to write notes where he said there was 3, and I got the first one, 3 components we needed. Do you remember what that was? Maybe that was it.
Was this early on, like the 3 success factors for the plan?
3, 3.
Yes.
It was over, it was over.
Sure, I'm happy to repeat.
3 areas. I was going, oh my gosh, I'm trying to write it. Do you remember what that is?
Yes,
Or
the 3
something?
that I would encourage you to think about, having a clear vision and clear objectives, wrestling with the tough trade-offs within fiscal constraints, and linking those priorities to implementation.
Actually, I didn't get the third one either, and I forgot that I didn't get it. So thank you. Director Alessio, that was just the perfect question.
Oh, good.
There were also 3 criteria that Napa County does not meet to qualify for some of the funding. And one was no rail. What were the other 2?
Yeah, maybe I can give a little more info on the transit-oriented communities policy. So the transit-oriented communities policy applies to station areas for rail, ferry, and bus rapid transit. Now, that comes with a lot of strings. Jurisdictions are, in much of the rest of the Bay Area are wrestling with implementing the policies that make transit more successful in those places. MTC has funded and is providing technical assistance to help jurisdictions implement that. Now, the policy did include an opt-in provision, so places that maybe don't have those modes of transit can participate and perhaps unlock more funding opportunities in the future. So it is it's a carrot and stick where there's additional money, but also it comes with some requirements to, really think about what makes transit thrive in a place, right? That's the highlights, but I'm happy to get into more of the policy later on.
Okay, sorry. Thank you for an excellent presentation. I wanted to focus your attention on the scope and definition of equity priority communities, and wondering just out loud whether there are any opportunities to expand that definition, particularly in areas like Napa County, and particularly my city, the city of St. Helena, California, where we're experiencing a population that is getting older. And so I recognize that you focus on, or we are to focus on low income and communities of color, what we rightfully should be doing. But, there are other communities of equity that maybe there are opportunities, particularly in Napa County, where you have a population that's getting older. What are your thoughts on that?
Just, we should have expanded on what that means. It actually means low income. It means communities with large population of underrepresented people of color, and elderly people, and disabled people, and people that don't speak English. So it's a pretty expanded policy. And I don't think I'm missing anything. What? Oh, rent and burdened as well. And St. Helena falls within that. And there is a CBTP in St. Helena.
And I appreciate those comments. I think there's maybe a narrative or a view of my community being maybe wealthier than other communities. And I want to disabuse people of that. There are pockets of wealth in our community, but there are seniors in our community that struggle to get around, pay their rent, those kinds of things. So I'm glad for the clarification. Anything else to add to that?
Yeah, I was just just to clarify one thing about the definition. So there's actually 8 components, including older adults as one of the factors. I did kind of breeze through it a little bit, but the primary factors are related to income and race, but there are 6 additional factors we use in terms of identifying these places. I think the other thing I would put out there is, MTC has used this framework of equity priority communities for several decades, which is a geographic approach. And I think as we think about social equity and the challenges in that space, we're wrestling in the years ahead with whether that's the right approach to be using. Certain demographics may have significant needs, but they are not geographically clustered in a single space. So we're trying to be very thoughtful as we go forward at the regional scale, that equity may be a more expansive thing than simply census tracts on the map, that it may be thinking about these different lenses of, of equity when we're doing our planning. And it may not always be about place-based. It may be more about people, right?
Thank you.
Any other comments? Oh, go ahead.
Very good. Thank you for the presentation. I believe that you mentioned that most trips in Napa County begin and end here. And my question refers to, are we referring to private vehicle trips, or does that include public transportation trips? And does that make Napa County different in any way than other neighboring North Bay counties, say? And what's the significance of that information that most trips begin and end within the county?
I love the multi-part question. There's a lot to talk about there. So let me first just say, I think the statistics that are cited are for all trips, not just one specific mode. Napa County has that similarity with Sonoma County as well. Sonoma County, I think, actually may even have the highest or second highest level of intra-county focus in the North Bay. There's differences with some of the other North Bay counties. So Solano County has significant outcommuting occurring to other parts of the region, as does Marin, given its closer connection to San Francisco. I think on your the last part of your question in terms of the policy significance, a couple things to think about here. One is with more folks, having their travels focused within a county, that maybe is something to think about as you think about the balance of resources. Where should funding go in terms of what types of trips are you trying to serve with investments? It also presents some pretty interesting opportunities. One statistic most folks don't know is in the San Francisco Bay Area, this is not just in the big urban centers, roughly 15% of all trips in the San Francisco Bay Area are walking trips. And I think we discount sometimes active modes like that because they're not used as much for commuting, right? People don't typically walk to work, but people might walk for recreation. They may walk to a corner store or a cafe or a grocery, right? And so thinking about how we serve more localized trips and how we invest in active transportation is just something to reflect on, especially in the kind of the town context, right? Like how do we allow people to make that 15 or 20-minute morning walk to the coffee shop safely, right?
Can I say? Boy, I'm having all these little things I'm thinking about. And this is just really, one is, again, thank you for connecting both investments, which is also city and county budgets, right, including this agency budgeting, along with the need for policies. We can't just throw money in or just create policies and not back it up with the other. It needs to have both. So I really appreciate that. That was an aha moment for me. The other is just a little data that some people know and some people may not know, is that in 2023, the Workforce Alliance of North Bay provided their report, and they reported that 36,000 people, this is in 2023, commute into Napa County every day. And we know that's an affordability issue, and that 30,000 people commute out of Napa County per day. So we have this influx of 66,000 people coming and going in a very small, tight area of this county, which is why South Haskell Junction was paramount. And now we really need to address the airport, the Highway 12 and 29 intersection. And frankly, we need those roundabouts up Valley, the Napa Valley Forward project that MTC did support some funding for. So we need to continue with that work. But again, we do need to look at this. I'll go back to what I said, this holistically, but thank you for your points. I just want to share that other information.
Go ahead. Oh, Amber, and then.
Thank you. So Napa County has a relatively large rural area, and I didn't hear much about rural transportation in your presentation, but I know there are challenges very specific to that type of land use, and I'm sure MTC is thinking about it. I'd be interested to hear what you might have to say about people who are living in outlying areas and may need to update their homes to enable them to have electric cars, or more transportation security generally, because there can be a lot of shared trips for people that are lower income in rural areas. So just anything on that would be interesting to hear. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for the question. I think one thing, I think is important to emphasize is, in the rural context, we're not anticipating that folks are going to be making these sort of modal changes that we're, hoping for in a more urban or suburban context, right? We understand that those areas are going to be served by primarily cars and trucks, right? So the question is, how can we minimize the environmental impacts? I think that's an area where we think a lot about the electrification angle, kind of transcending transportation and thinking about some of the other angles of our plan. That's where we're thinking about, building retrofit, safety in terms of wildfires. That's a major concern. So, part of the reason why my presentation may be focused more on kind of the town or city context is because in order to minimize environmental impacts in those rural areas, minimize exposing communities to wildfires and other sort of climate risks, we're really trying to focus the growth in those places and support it with transportation. But you're absolutely right. In terms of the folks who are existing residents in those rural areas, how are we making sure that they have access to EV chargers, for example? So those are and we're as I mentioned, we've tried to start funding more in that space. Obviously, there's a massive need in terms of electrification, and it's our belief is that the state funding gets us part of the way there, but there's actually an insufficient amount to get the sort of goals you see in the news headlines about all cars being electric, all new cars being sold being electric by 2035.
Well, in actuality, Directors Alicia and Manfred took most of my questions. And, but, and that was an aha for me about the planning versus project and what that means. But also, with a little different look at the more rural areas, I see it as how can the less populated areas contribute to the overall plan. And there was one thing that when you were answering one of the questions that I think was left out. Yes, we want electrification. That will contribute. The other issue is in transportation within the valley. I don't want to forget that a robust bus system can be very helpful. And we're being from a rural jurisdiction, we want the overall plan to work, but we want to know what we can do.
I guess what I would add is absolutely on the transit investments, our plans do include significant frequency improvements along those trunk line corridors north to south. I think what I would say is, we have to think about the right mobility solutions for different levels of density, right? And so how do we provide the right options that meet the needs of different residents, right? So obviously you need to pair those investments in the automobile mode with electrification, with safety projects, with those investments in transit as well.
Yes, have we got all the questions out? Are we ready for lunch? Okay, then I don't know. We're just going to break for lunch. And where is it? Oh, I think we already did. Well, yeah. Yeah. Okay. Oh. So a couple of things. I guess the first question is, even though everyone on the board's had a chance to ask questions, I would be remiss if I didn't offer the same opportunity to the members in the audience. If you have any questions, probably come to the front, or how do we want to handle the speaker thing? Do we have two since?
Hi, I'm Ashley Tencher. I'm part of the CAC committee. And I have a question for our speaker. It seems that we in our county are experiencing, and across the state with RENA, these needs to build more housing. And yet it seems to me the need for more housing percentage-wise is greater than our population growth. And I think we in our county have a real challenge with second and third homes and a lot of unoccupied housing. And I wonder if you can speak to that.
Well, I would say that's a little different topic than what I was covering today, but I'm happy to tackle it. It actually is a topic that HCD, the State Housing Community Development Department, dug into as part of its RENA reform effort that it conducted. It released a report, I believe, last year, where they identified a series of areas of for improvement to the arena process. And one of them was second and third homes, vacation properties, which not only affects places like Napa County, but also places like South Lake Tahoe or Palm Springs. So that is actually an area that they are looking at more broad kind of systemic reform across the state in terms of how that affects the RENA process for the next cycle. As I'm aware, I don't think they've implemented that reform yet. It was part of this report, but that cycle doesn't start for another few years. So it may be an area that there's some revisions made to the RENA framework before we get to cycle 7. So we'll be watching that space. That report included a kind of a long list of potential areas of RENA reform, and some of them have already been enacted into law.
Okay, thank you. Any other public comments? All right. Then, what? We can do that as well, but okay, then we'll just hold. All right. If there's no other public comments, then we'll take a break for lunch.
We're going to go ahead and introduce the consulting team, and they are going to take the lead from this point forward. Great.
All right.
And I
Take
can
it
do
away.
that.
You're okay, then we'll
Yeah, we're good.
introduce our
Look.
consultant and you take it away.
Good afternoon. I'm Bob Grandy with Fair and Peers. We look forward to an interactive discussion over the next 90 minutes on what has changed since the last CTP, the intersection of land use and transportation, and our third topic, which is vision and goals for the new CTP. So we'll be talking about each of those topical categories. And Bonnie, Ashley, and I will be supporting and documenting your discussion today. I'd like to start with some brief introductions. So I recently managed the inaugural CTP for Marin County, which was a very interesting exercise. It was adopted last December. It was their inaugural CTP. And I'm working now on the Contra Costa CTP. And as a firm, we're working on CTPs for Alameda, Santa Clara, and San Mateo counties. So doing a lot of work around the Bay right now. And these range from major updates to sort of minor updates. So there's a pretty big range in terms of the work plan for each of those. I'm excited to partner with Bonnie Nelson today. Bonnie is, in my opinion, the preeminent consultant in the Bay Area on agency strategic plans and funding plans. And she will facilitate 6 discussion breakouts with you today. So the way that we'll organize this, I will introduce some slides just to kind of set up the topic. And then Bonnie is going to have a discussion with you and she'll have some specific questions. We'll have you vote. So we'll kind of go back and forth between the slides and discussion for the next 90 minutes. Ashley is our team's technical leader. She filled a similar role in the Napa Vision Zero plan recently and led our team in developing these retreat materials. So done a lot of the great work to get us here today, and we'll be documenting your comments. So with that, next slide. This slide shows 6 policy areas. So getting to the question of what has changed since the last CTP, this slide shows 6 policy areas where there have been significant changes have occurred over the last, say, 4 or 5 years during and after the pandemic. And we'll cover the first 3, funding, travel behavior, and land use transportation, in more detail in subsequent slides. So we have a series of slides coming up after this one. So safety, and you'll hear some commonality for what Dave talked about in terms of his presentation, but safety has emerged as a high priority as fatalities really increased substantially from 2019 through 2023. You may have seen the news articles that in 24 we saw a decline, first one in 5 years on a national level. But that motivated US DOT to identify a new safe systems approach and to establish a new federal safety funding program. In Napa County specifically, NVTA adopted the Vision Zero plan last year to address how to move forward with respect to safety. Evacuation assessments and planning efforts have expanded significantly in the last 5 years, as we've seen more extreme wildfire, heat, and flooding events have occurred. And lastly, the ongoing community-based transportation plan and accessible transportation needs assessment are examples of your plan's efforts to provide expanded mobility and resources for vulnerable and underserved residents. Next slide. So now we'll start a series of 7 slides on transportation funding, and we'll end on the 7th slide. It will be Bonnie's opportunity to talk to you about NVTA roles, but those slides will include an overview of kind of funding, the key decision makers, what are the major sources for Napa County funding, what are the needs, an illustration of the needs, and lastly, NVTA roles. And transportation funding is fairly complex for a variety of reasons. One, there are many programs, and they tend to fluctuate over time in terms of how much money they have availability, in terms of their criteria, their rules. So there's a lot of change that happens within the many, many dozens and frankly over 100 programs that are out there for transportation funding. Many capital projects also require multiple funding sources. So the bigger the project, the more funding sources you probably have. And generally, federal agencies like to be the last source of your funding. And so that means local agencies have to find some combination of local, regional, state funding before they go to the federal government and say, fill that last part of my funding need on a project. So next slide. So I want to talk a little bit about federal funding, and this slide compares the current federal reauthorization bill, which is IIJA, which expires next year in 2026, with the prior bill, the FAST Act. And the big message that I want to get across is that IIJA was significantly different than the previous reauthorization bills. If you go all the way back to 1991 and ICE-T, it was very different. It had a lot more money. That 1.2 trillion is obviously a lot more than the 305 billion in the FAST Act. It also significantly expanded a number of competitive or discretionary grant programs, meaning that you need to go to the federal government, the US DOT, to ask for that funding. Prior to IIJA, the overwhelming share of federal money came to the states through block grants, and there were only a small number of these discretionary competitive grant programs. So that was a sea change. So a lot more money, although I will say that about half of the 1.2 trillion is for surface transportation, meaning highways and transit. That's typically been an 80-20 split. So if you're curious about how the federal government splits their money between highways and transit, it's been hovering around that split for a while now. And that was true with IIJA as well. The other big thing that happened there is there was a big rail component that President Biden wanted to have as part of that. So that was an addition that was not in place in prior bills at the level that of funding that was provided. So next slide. The other thing that we see is that revenues from the federal gas fuel tax are declining, and this is due to more fuel efficient vehicles. So the more efficient vehicles get, the less gas they buy, and the revenue that's generated by those goes down. But at a national level, we're seeing VMT increasing. There was a dip during COVID, but we're seeing it increasing again. And federal taxes are based on per gallon sold and not indexed to cost of fuel. California has some indexing with respect to fuel generated taxes. The federal government does not. So I wanted to ask a quick trivia question to the group, and we'll see if anybody in board members know the answer to this question. Do you know the last year, how far you'd have to go back to the last time the federal government raised the fuel tax? Anybody have An idea, audience? 1993, I heard 93. That is correct. So it's been a little over 30 years since the federal fuel tax was increased. So it's at the same level it was back in 1993. So that means revenues from federal fuel are going down, and they're backfilled by the general fund at the federal level. So next slide. So we thought it might be helpful to talk a little bit about who are the decision makers with respect to these grant programs. And there are a number of them. So this slide shows federal, state, and regional funds and gives some examples of who decision makers are. So key highlight is that these decisions are pretty decentralized across multiple different agencies. And in some cases, those decisions are delegated. So an example would be that MTC, who's a regional agency, makes the decisions on about 75% of the state STIP funds, the state transportation improvement funds. So that's an example of a delegation of authority of decision-making with respect to deciding who gets funded through these various funding sources. Next slide. This slide highlights some of the major funding sources for transportation for Napa County. Local Measure U, which congratulations on extending and modifying Measure T as a major accomplishment. It supplements state funds for road maintenance and also provides a local match for competitive grants to implement the designated capital projects that are in that expenditure plan. Other major funding sources include the city-county impact fees, bridge tolls, state sales tax for transit or TDA, Senate Bill 1, which increased the state fuel taxes, and federal programs. So that's sort of the bigger of the sources of funding for projects in Napa County. Next slide. So to give you a little bit of an illustration of funding needs, if we take a look back at the 2021 CTP, it included 105 projects that are listed in your current CTP. There was also an evaluation of estimated revenue that would be available over that 25-year window, comparing that to the costs, and it found that there was a $754 million unfunded need over those 25 years, or roughly the equivalent of an average of about 30 million a year in unfunded needs. So a significant difference there between available revenues and the project needs. And next slide. So this is our final slide on funding. This is really meant to just give you a few the background information, and I'll turn it over to Bonnie to review and facilitate a discussion. But wanted to talk about the fact that NVTA wears multiple hats when it comes to funding, including administering your sales tax, advocating for Napa interests, providing recommendations for grant programs. There are certain grant programs where you actually make those recommendations and that's then forwarded on to MTC. For instance, passing through funds to local agency, assisting local partners with grant applications, and in some cases, applying for grants. And so what we want to do is pause and have a little discussion about those different ways, the different hats essentially that NVTA wears, and where you might have interest in seeing some emphasis in the CTP going forward. So I'll turn it over to Bonnie.
Thanks, Bob. Before we get into all that, I would like to just take a pause for a moment. You've had a lot of information thrown at you in a few slides. Do you have any questions, first of all, for Bob?
What benefits them benefits all of us. I just would like to help that too. Not say it's just for roads and streets, but I know that's one of the areas.
Great.
Within the city.
Great. Yes.
I was just wondering, how secure are the federal funds?
Good question. Do you want to take that one, Bob?
Not sure if that's a question for me or for that Dave might be better to respond to. You want to take it? I can give you my general thoughts, and then maybe I'll let Dave respond. So a couple of things. If you look at what has been happening in Washington, D.C., and you look at the House bill, they're looking at significant cuts in many programs that are identified in their bill. But transportation was not one of them. It tends to be a generally bipartisan area of agreement in DC, and it's an area of support. And so there is an interest in, I believe, in there may be some reduction in the, I don't think we'll see as much money in the next reauthorization bill for transportation. That was my own personal opinion, but I think we'll see continued support. Both the House and Senate are now working on the reauthorization bill for next year, and their chairs have said they want it to be bipartisan. They want to, but every time you have a new authorization bill, it's going to include the policies of the new administration and whoever's in control of Congress. So I think we will see changes. There's no doubt about that. I'm of the opinion that you will probably see a similar amount of money, but you'll see more block grants like it used to be and fewer discretionary programs at the federal level, which means that if that happens, you're going to see that money filtering down to Caltrans and MTC, who will be having that money go through their grant programs. That would be my opinion on where I think we might be headed in the next 2 to 4 years, but I'd be, Dave, interested in hearing your thoughts.
Thank you. So I agree with a lot of what Bob said. I'll maybe just add a little additional lens. I think there are big difference between formula funding and these discretionary grant programs. And as Bob was alluding to, there was an extraordinary number of discretionary grant programs in the IIJA. And, it's those programs that this current administration is really targeting. In the previous Trump administration, a lot of grant making continued in some similar form. It was the transportation space didn't see like a radical shift during that previous administration, but signs are indicating that might be a bit different going, this time around. So I think, as was mentioned, we see the formula funding maybe as a little bit safer, but a lot of these discretionary programs may go away or may turn into kind of formula funding instead. The other thing that we're, keeping a close eye on is just the strings that are being attached to money. I think that's definitely something, especially for whatever discretionary grant programs are preserved, what strings may be attached, new requirements, et cetera.
And I think
I just add, I'm sorry,
Go
I
ahead.
just add a couple of things to that. The red states largely are benefited from the big blue states who are donor states. So I would think that some of the Republican legislators are going to be very hands off the transportation authorization. Also, I have, with the exception of the very first authorization bill when I was, 12, that was the only one that wasn't continued, extended over and over again. They have a really hard time pulling together the entire bill. And so it's unclear if this, given what's going on in Washington, whether that's going to happen again. It's also the timing of this bill's expiration is maybe not ideal. It is not a transit-friendly administration, and we're already seeing the appropriations on the transit side come in lower than what the authorization is. On the highway side, those funds are, we get them on obligation authority, and it's a little bit different because every year on the transit side, we have to wait until Congress appropriates it. So there's some things that are going on, some nuances that concern me a little bit. And then just to Dave's point is that the administration is responsible for actually writing sort of the rules of how the funds get distributed. So those aren't all specified by Congress in the authorization. So there's some looseness in how they could actually apply what is said in the law and what is actually delivered. But overall, I think, if I would not want to be, in the medical business right now or working for a university. I think we're probably pretty safe in terms of the amount of money that we're going to get in transportation. It's just, again, how it's distributed.
And I think as we think about the funding picture for transportation, we have to think globally, not just at the federal level. If there is a recession or a downturn in the economy of any kind, sales tax will not keep up with what has been projected. I'm sure your projections for sales tax have already changed. And the same is true of gas tax funds and everything else. So you're right to be concerned. There's a lot of uncertainty out there, and a lot depends on the overall strength of the economy. Great question. Other questions? Yes.
Sorry, just real quick. In terms of, because Measure U and Measure G both offer the aspects or flexibility of bonding, can you talk about how that may be beneficial or not in the next so many years as we're looking at these big projects?
Touch on. We talked a little bit about that yesterday with Bolton, who does our projections on our sales tax. It's not a good environment to issue debt. And the biggest challenge I think that we're going to have is that over, we really wanted to issue debt in the front of the program so that the cost of paying it back wasn't an impediment to delivering other projects. The longer we go without issuing debt, the more expensive it becomes to borrow. I think also the other thing that's going to be our challenge in terms of local revenues and what we plan to do with them is just the cost of construction materials.
Yep.
It's going to go up, and if the tariffs are not, we most of us have an obligation for federal funds to use Buy America. But we don't have that restriction at the local level. And then I think because prices are going to go up everywhere because of the tariffs, local manufacturers are going to take advantage of that as well. So there's two challenges. One, the bond market not being friendly right now, timing of how long we can go before it becomes too expensive to borrow anyway, and then just the cost of construction. Yeah.
Great question. Any other questions? Great. Then I get to ask you a question. On this slide, Bob talked about all of the different roles that NVTA has in seeking funding. You are both the pass-through agency, the collectors and distributors of sales tax funds, but you also have roles in terms of partnering with other agencies, preparing grants that cross jurisdictional boundaries, encouraging people from the various cities and counties to work together to be able to go for some larger grants. Thinking as we go forward into the Countywide Transportation Plan, are those roles that you think NVTA should continue to focus on into the future? I see heads nodding. Yeah. Good. Okay. And do you think that your individual communities that you represent have the capacity to go for grants on their own, or is it beneficial to have NVTA be the sponsor of grants and provide that assistance to your communities? Yeah. Sure. Sure. And the size of the grant. Yeah. I think one of the things we know is that you are more competitive when you work together. You're a small county with small jurisdictions. When you band together and work together, and this is where NVTA has been very useful, very helpful, you're able to have an outsized presence. And it's been, that cooperation has helped you and will continue going forward. Okay, we're going to move on and talk about travel behavior. And that doesn't mean how you behave when you're traveling.
Thanks, Bonnie. So the next 4 slides provide highlights of recent data collected by RSG for an update of the 2020 travel behavior study. You'll see more of these later, but we thought we'd just give you a flavor of some of the data that we already have available. And a key conclusion of the early analysis of that data is that traffic volumes in VMT have pretty much fully recovered and are virtually identical to the 2020 level. So the dip that occurred during COVID, you're back to normal, and you probably experienced that as you're driving around the streets of Napa. one thing we did want to note is that Napa actually has one of the lowest resident work from home share in the Bay Area at 12%. And those work from home shares go up to, I think, a peak of 33%. And as a comparison, Marin County is currently at 30% work from home share. And that has a pretty significant effect on volumes, particularly at the gateways when you see those higher shares. So Napa has not experienced what many other counties have experienced with a large share of work from home, and particularly the drop in commuter transit demand that has occurred in a lot of communities and affected agencies like BART and Caltrans and Golden Gate Transit, who operates both ferry and bus service in the North Bay. So next slide. So the next slide shows the 10 largest daily trip generators in Napa County. And so these include shopping centers, college, medical, civic, and airport uses. Any surprises on this list? Okay, doesn't look like I see any surprises. So the next slide shows where Napa County residents work. And so about 3 out of every 4 Napa County residents work in the county, according to the data that was collected. And the residents that are most likely to commute for jobs outside the county are going to Solano, Sonoma, and Contra Costa County. So the bordering counties to the west, south, and east, if you will. Yes.
So 77% of Napa County residents are working within the county? Just want to clarify that.
That's correct.
Yes. Okay, thank you.
Excuse me? Yes. I don't have the full spreadsheet with me, so I don't, but yes, it's less than 1%. The last slide on travel behavior shows where Napa County employees live. So roughly about 69% of Napa workers live in the county. For workers commuting into the county, those largely, the largest share come from Solano County at 16% and Sonoma County at 6%. And the others are smaller, 1 to 2% range. So that's just a few quick snapshot of some of the data. I'm sure you'll see in a lot more detail at a later presentation of the travel behavior study. Yes.
Compare that to other counties. I mean, it seems like we've said, a lot of people live and work in Napa. How does that compare with the other surrounding counties?
I would say if I'm talking about Marin County, it's a very different phenomena in Marin County, I think, because you have a much larger share of service employees that are commuting into Marin County, and particularly coming across 37 and the Richmond-Santa Fe Bridge. And the converse is you've got residents who are commuting into San Francisco for the jobs in the city. And so you see with the high work from home share, what we've seen is a real dip in volumes on the Golden Gate Bridge, on the ferries, and on the Golden Gate buses that go into downtown San Francisco. So that's probably the county I'm most familiar with in terms of the data. And true. It's from a travel perspective, it's in my mind related a lot to the service employees that are coming into Marin County, because a lot of those service employees are going to work either at homes or at retirement facilities or at other locations, medical facilities, where they're serving their retired community in Marin. Marin's actually got a very active senior community, and speaking as one of the Marin residents who was very active. So it's anyway, those are the kind of the areas where I kind of see it tying in terms of the senior community with the travel patterns. So Dave, I don't know if you have any other thoughts as to other counties that might be similar in nature.
Well, I will say, there are definitely similarities and differences throughout all the North Bay counties. On the older adult population front, it is true that Marin County, I believe, has the highest share of folks above 75 of any Bay Area county, but it is true that some of the North Bay counties have a older population than the regional average. When it comes to the transportation impacts of that, I mean, we do know that, you know, older adults still want to be able to get around, but they don't have that commute as part of their journey. So it's about looking at the rest of the trip making and how we serve that. And to the earlier point about kind of the commute patterns, what I would say is, if you look at those 4 North Bay counties, Sonoma and Napa have this greater focus of the greater balance between where people live and work, and Marin and Solano are the 2 that have the most kind of in and out of county commuting that's happening.
If I could maybe draw one parallel, and we're getting a little bit off the travel data, but one of the challenges that I think is a parallel in Marin is if you look at West Marin, there's a large senior community in West Marin, and I think of it as very similar to the Up Valley Napa issue in terms of particularly with respect to access to healthcare. And so that's been an area that they've been working on figuring out ways to address that, because many of the West Marin residents are going long distances to seek healthcare, Santa Rosa, San Francisco. And so how do you get folks who don't have access, who can't drive, to those healthcare services? So that may be a sort of a parallel in terms of Marin and Napa and sort of needs in terms of Up Valley versus West Marin.
Just really quick, Bob, what's your data source? And this is specifically working residents, correct? Just the workforce is the 69%, not the overall population?
So there are data sources. I'm not working directly on the study. I don't know if Diana, if you want to jump in.
This is the update of our travel behavior study. You know, all the data hasn't been crunched yet, but we said, can you put together a few slides with the current data? The last one was done in 2021. So this one, we're crunching the data now and kind of pulling it all together, but this is current data from this current update of the travel behavior study. And as Bob said, they're using multiple different types of data sources compiled to get this information.
So I can tell you what I do know is it includes big data. So that's data from connected vehicles, that it includes traffic count data. So that's count data in the field. It includes census data. Danielle and others.
Yeah. So in our previous travel behavior study, it was really focused on location-based services, which is tracking your cell phone. So a lot of the apps just track you, and how it works is it's overlaid on a map where, you know, your cities, your jurisdictions have zoning, and the zoning has home locations and work locations. So where businesses lie, where homes lie, and it actually unique identifiers all these little anonymous pins and follows them around. And if they're spending most of their time from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. At a work location, they're marking that work, and then they'll follow that little pin home and say, oh, it's sleeping, you know, like here. And so that's how location-based services works with a lot of the apps. Like Facebook is a big one where you're giving your data anonymously all the time. And then I would say now there's some legislative requirements that make it more, there's more security and anonymity, but they still do track you. And then big data companies get that data, but then they pair it with, as Bob said, connected vehicles. So a lot of newer vehicles are connected and sharing their locations and data, as well as we have models, travel models that we put in this information. They're getting like credit card data and all sorts of data. And we have a data analyst expert, Kevin Johnson from RSG, and he's going to come to a board meeting in the future and give you a whole update on our 2024 data.
Thank you. That's great and creepy.
This number, though, somewhat changes the narrative, Liz. When we look at 70% of employees live here, that's not the normal narrative that we hear.
So this next section addresses land use and transportation. And the purpose of aligning the vision for transportation with the vision for land use is really to create a more efficient and cost-effective system. So we've listed sort of 5 common desired outcomes in achieving this alignment between land use and transportation. And these include safer streets, a more resilient street network, economically thriving places, reduce climate effects, and improve public health. All of those are sort of outcomes that you'd like to see. And sort of the more you connect, and Dave talked about this, the more you think about land use and transportation as being interwoven, and the decisions made on each affect the other. And we'll talk a little bit more in detail about that in a minute. So on the next slide, this is a kind of an overview slide. The 4 remaining slides that I'll talk about on land use and transportation, and we'll be talking a little bit more about transit-oriented development, or TOD, MTC place designations, and we'll pause in that slide to have a discussion with you about that. How land use choices affect transportation, and conversely, how transportation choices affect land use. So we want to talk a little bit about each of those and this sort of interface between land use and transportation. Next slide. So TOD is a strategy for locating denser mixed uses near transit routes. And TOD is the most effective way to increase transit ridership and results in fewer vehicles on the road. And there are some illustrative criteria that we've identified for TOD sites, including locating more dense sites, including affordable housing near transit. And as you're doing that, really thinking about making those sites walkable to transit, and putting those in areas that are walkable both to transit and to services and retail in those areas. So next slide. This slide is about, describes MTC's programs. So I'm going to turn it over to Dave to talk a little more in depth about the PDA and COC, and then Bonnie will have a discussion with you after that.
So we did have a chance to cover a little bit of this earlier, but just to recap, the Priority Development Areas Framework is something that was developed by the Association of Bay Area Governments in the 2000s. It's really about local nominations and volunteering places for focused growth that are intended to be more, walkable, transit-oriented locations. As noted here, there are several PDAs here in Napa County. There's also a priority production area. We're right nearby there right now, or maybe inside the boundaries of that priority production area, which is a location for more focus on jobs, and specifically industrial jobs here near the airport. As I mentioned in my presentation earlier, one key difference between Napa County and the other 8 counties in the region is that there are no transit-oriented communities within the county. This is the newer framework that's been developed in 2022. And as I mentioned, it comes with a variety of different requirements to conduct local planning, change densities and intensities to make them more transit supportive, implement housing policies, parking policies, and improve station access for walking and biking to the stations. As mentioned, we do continue to support funding through for all these different types of growth geographies, but the TOC framework is really the kind of newer and more emerging framework. And it does include that opt-in provision that jurisdictions can choose to pursue if they're interested. I'll pause there and just if there's any questions, or if we want to continue the presentation.
Question I would have for you then is, given the definition of what the TOC policy entails and what you might get from it in terms of access to new funding and technical support, but along with that comes density requirements, access to transit, that sort of thing, it would be a significant change for what's happening in most of Napa County right now. Is there any interest in pursuing TOC, opting in to pursue TOC designation? Yes.
Any other reactions, or do I just get to determine policy?
No, I think the interest is definitely there. but just the build out of current infrastructure, location, that's what makes it difficult.
Sure.
What is available, we have, we have an urban limit line. How do, you can't extend your city limits without a vote of the general population. So those are the constraints, I think, on the TODs. So I think we all have interest, just where to put them.
In regards to that, parking management is definitely an opportunity. I know at the city of Napa, I keep referencing, I was with the city of Napa, so I'm speaking on behalf of my friends and colleagues there. The transit station access outside the one downtown, the new transit center, maintenance center, it's not within doesn't work within the design. Of course, we're all focusing on affordable housing and the protection and preservation of. And so number 2, stabilizing business. I say that, the first box, possibly 2, but as our mayor said, from Napa, it's difficult because we have constraints, which we put in there for design.
Well, that's good feedback as we begin this process to know that there is some interest, and we'll see where that goes.
Bernie, you've got a comment?
I put up the yellow card just because when I look at communities, I think about, if I was to rephrase that, I put Napa multimodal oriented communities, because really the goal, me personally, is lower the VMTs. If ridership, goes down and VMTs goes up, I don't say it's a good thing. But if ridership goes down, VMTs goes down, but intermodal goes up, then I see it as a good thing. So really, I think more about how we orientate communities to use anything other than a vehicle, whether it's biking, walking, so any of that. So I would think more towards that regard than just transit.
Yeah.
I know it's in our nature here, but really I'm thinking about lowering VMTs.
No, I think that's great. That's very helpful.
I want to actually maybe dig a little deeper and Dave ask you a question about this, but maybe we could explore like what exactly that might look like for some of the communities. And what I'm anticipating is it might be something where you would identify a corridor where you either have high frequency transit service or want it, and would have supporting policies along that corridor. In other words, and the outcome might, so if there were 1 or 2 or 3 corridors in the county where you say, hey, that sounds like an area we might be interested in, a TOC corridor that would be designated, and then these policies would address the catchment area for those corridors. Am I reading that right, Dave, in terms of that maybe being a direction if there's interest?
Yeah, so certainly because it's an opt-in thing, it is something that would be on a jurisdiction scale, and it would be more on a localized scale within the jurisdiction. So most of the TOCs that exist today throughout the Bay Area, they're like as I mentioned, they're bus, ferry, rail stations, and the surrounding half-mile radius. So that could be a key bus stop or transit center that serves as kind of the hub of a transit-oriented community if one was identified. The policies related to TOCs are specific to the area around transit for several categories, but for others, they extend to the whole jurisdictional scale. So like on the housing policies, they're generally at the jurisdiction scale. Some of the other policies here, like densities, intensities, it's really about the area that's been self-identified by the jurisdiction. So those are a couple key considerations. For many jurisdictions, there are aspects of these policies that they're already meeting or already working towards. And there are other policies which they would not be in alignment today, but with more planning or other efforts, they could work towards those requirements. So it really varies, and it requires analysis at a local level to understand how big of a leap that would be, because it differs so much by jurisdiction.
Any other comments? Amber?
Yeah, I'll jump in really quickly. I mean, this seems like a real challenge of right sizing for communities that are small with concepts that are usually applied in really big ways. So I think the question is kind of just what kind of business case can you make for doing this on the scale that we're working with here? And then, of course, Napa being functionally a lot like an island because we don't have very good transit connections to outlying areas, or even the highways are fairly constrained to outlying areas because of the nature of the geography. So I'm interested in seeing you explore that for sure, and just thinking about how to connect things, or where it's appropriate even to connect things, because, to some extent, getting the right housing mix for our workforce might make more sense than spending a bunch of money on connecting transit for a workforce that's remote. You know what I mean? So, just as a holistic community planning kind of approach. And I also wanted to echo Narvaez's comments that multimodal is a big plus, and I think it's something that can easily be fitted into our existing communities. They're mostly flat and, relatively low volume traffic on a lot of streets. And so finding opportunities there should be low hanging fruit.
And if I can throw in another comment, and I know NVTA is exploring this in terms of grants, but in American Canyon, we have an area of land that is in transition, we'll say, that was recently rezoned industrial and arguably will eventually become part of the city. And we're looking at that from a much larger mixed-use transit-oriented development. It's got rail through there. It's obviously adjacent to the 29 corridor, and so on. So that's a fairly large chunk of land. So there's an opportunity to really do something significant, and if well thought out, transformational. So we're there, or we could be there.
I have one other little thing, which is I'm really curious about seasonality with trips, because you presented something that is probably annual or in multi-annual average, but we do have a highly seasonal workforce and tourism economy, and that might be something to look at too, of different schedules fitting different times better.
So we have two more land use transportation slides I'm going to touch on briefly, and just a couple examples of how we'll see smart land use choices can make the transportation system more efficient. And then another slide on the inverse in terms of how transportation projects affect land use. Just a few examples. So focusing denser projects near including affordable housing in transit-rich areas increases both housing supply and reduces VMT. So there's some benefits that accrue when you do that. So as decisions come forward in terms of projects that are in these transit-rich areas, maintaining the density can be important in terms of accomplishing those things. Providing pedestrian and bicycle infrastructure and making that connectivity to schools, retail, and civic uses improves accessibility in those areas. And then locating projects on the resilience side, locating projects away from very high wildfire zones, or providing evacuation route options and enhancements can improve resilience. So those are ways that we think about sort of land use decisions that affect the transportation system, or maybe might require some adjustments to the transportation system. And the last slide on the land use and transportation, then I'll have Bonnie talk to you a little bit about the question of how can NVTA and local agencies align these sort of land use and transportation visions? So any ideas you have on that and things you would want us to carry into the CTP. This is about how transportation projects affect land use. And the obvious one is that if you make transportation investments, may encourage greater levels of adjacent development. So as you spend money on infrastructure and provide that capacity, it can stimulate new development in those areas, maybe that wasn't even planned. Designing or reconfiguring your streets to be safer based on, say, the US DOT Safe Systems guidance reduces fatal and injury crashes. So there's a benefit then to creating a safe communities, safe land areas in terms of walkability in these communities. And lastly, providing more transit service similarly provides greater travel options for developments along the bus routes. So those are a couple of different ways that these alignments can have benefits in terms of aligning land use and transportation. And I just want to talk briefly before we wrap up this section on land use and transportation connections about are there ways that NVTA and the agencies can work together sort of to help sort of align these visions?
So thinking about the fact that you all wear multiple hats, you all have different roles in the cities and towns and in the county itself, and you have your role in NVTA. Are there things that NVTA can be doing better, differently, or just the same to partner with your local jurisdiction on these issues of land use and transportation to better align their vision, their goals, their priorities? And what might that be?
the individual bodies. I think that willingness, again, there's so much of a kind of a different culture in each of our 5 municipalities. Working together sometimes is challenging. I think it's communication, maybe a shared vision like a countywide transportation plan that everybody signs on to. We did that with our Measure U. I think all the jurisdictions did sign on with that. So those are the efforts that I think we need to keep focusing on moving forward.
I would echo that. I think NVTA does a good job interacting at the staff level, but I think if we really try to emphasize the idea that, you know, if we saw Napa Valley Transportation Authority as kind of your transit or transportation and transit experts in-house, that maybe the jurisdictions can see them as an asset to assist in, you know, rethinking some of the traditional urban planning options might come in handy. I think sometimes there's a perception that, okay, each jurisdiction handles their own thing and they may appreciate input, but may see NVTA in the same sense as getting input from Caltrans or Fish and Wildlife, which isn't the same kind of relationship I would like to see the two entities dealing with. So in terms of that, basically communications and relationships, I think NVTA can offer a lot in some of the urban development projects that are happening.
And one of the questions then is, how do we get NVTA involved at the right time? You know, I don't know that this has ever happened in Napa County, but I know it's happened a lot elsewhere where a city will plan an important land use that people who are transit dependent need to get to, but they will locate it up on a hill around a corner down the bend and then come to the transit agency and say, we need transit service to this new place that's almost impossible to serve. And then when the transit route doesn't do well, they're upset that the route gets discontinued. So it's really, this is the place, the earlier the involvement between NVTA and your local jurisdictions in planning, the more successful your projects are going to be. I think we can all agree on that.
I'm just real quickly because this isn't happening as much as it used to, but we used to get environmental documents for new developments and be on that list, and it's not consistent anymore. And that's the time when, you know, the draft environmental document is released, when we can comment and say that, you know, it would be very difficult for us to provide transit, or its transit is, you know, this development be well served by existing transit, or what can we do together to make transit work better? So that's not happening as much as it used to. And I think, you know, we just need to do a redo and work with, I think people just forget a lot of staff changes. But, you know, it's such a small community here that the line of communication between staff is pretty solid, typically.
Okay. Yeah, I to be honest, I would rather the input happen before the EIR, because it's still, once we send out an environmental impact report, it's kind of like, we know what we want. Now we just have to go through the process. So getting feedback there is still kind of like, we've poured the cement, it hasn't hardened yet, but go ahead and tell me what you think we should do instead. So we need to start even before that.
That's really helpful feedback. Yes.
Well, from what I understand, I mean, and this is not, I can't really answer this for our public works directors, but my understanding and my perception is that NVTA does work with public works directors in the county. And I feel like there's a lot of staff work and conversations that are happening that maybe this board is not quite aware of until it gets to the point where they're like, okay, now we're ready to present it to you, or this is where the decision point is at. I always think communication relations can always be a focus of improvement, but I do think there's work being done that we're not maybe quite aware of.
So just, and that's probably true, but our technical advisory committee technically is supposed to include the planning directors as well, and they tend not to participate depending on the jurisdiction as much as we'd like to see them. And that's maybe where that interaction can occur. And to that end, I would just want to acknowledge that there are a couple of planning directors here today. So
Yes. So thank you for being here.
And a couple of city managers too.
Yeah, I was just going to add on to what Kate said. So our technical advisory committee is made up of public works and planning staff. And the last time that we had a lot of engagement from the planning staff on that technical advisory committee was when we did the sub-regional regional housing needs allocation element. But I think I've talked to Diana, and we feel like we need to start convening NVTA planning manager and director specific meeting. So maybe it's done, 3 times a year, where we have our planning staff meet with each of the jurisdictions planning staff and really do a deeper dive into upcoming plans.
Great. Wonderful. Great. Okay, let's move to the next slide then. These next few slides are really the basic building blocks of the countywide transportation plan as they stand now. And this is where we are looking for your feedback as we proceed to put the Legos in place. I keep thinking about Legos because my husband and grandson have been very involved in building Legos, and they keep telling me that in order to build something really great, you have to have a stable base. So what we're doing today is we're trying to build the stable base on which your countywide transportation plan will be built. This is the vision statement that is proposed. It's the important part is after the colon. It's connecting land use, transportation, and community. Does that resonate with you? And if not, is there something missing that needs to be thought of as we go forward? Does anyone object to that statement? I'm sorry? Community should be number 1, connecting community, land use, and transportation. Great. I see a lot of nodding heads. Great. Anything else missing that feels like it's unaddressed there?
Maybe this is included based on just kind of assumption, but when we talk about housing, maybe that's part of the community aspect or land use aspect. So maybe that's encompassing within. Okay. And then in terms of the health and safety, I guess that's an assumption also that's an equity
Community.
that would be part of the community. Perfect. Thank you.
Sure.
Do we want to highlight environment?
How does the group feel about that?
That's above safety, right? With what we've witnessed.
Okay. We'll take that back. And we will move to the next slide. We're going to get to use these cards. So what you have on this slide is the themes that come up most often in countywide transportation plans. We have packaged them up for you, and we just want to be sure that, first of all, we have hit all of the high points, the things that you are most interested in. And we also recognize that not everything can be highest priority. So what I'd like to do is to go through the list and have you show me with your red, yellow, and green cards whether this is the highest, medium, or low priority for you. And then at the end, if there's anything not on the list that you think should be a priority, we can talk about making sure it gets added. So the first item is accessible travel needs. So that would be meeting the mobility needs of, meeting the accessibility needs of people in the county. Can I see the cards? I see mostly greens, 1, 2, 3 yellows, and the remainder are greens. We recording, Ashley? Thank you. Yes. Adapt the network to climate change. How important is adapting to climate change to you? I see.
Network of what?
What does that mean? Oh, the transportation network, your roadway system, so making sure that you're able to manage flooding,
Re-
sea level rise where
It's
that's
resiliency
and
of
resilience,
the
right.
transportation network. So that's what responding to climate change.
Yes, thank you. Includes fire. Yeah. And I see mostly greens, 1 yellow. Great. Better access to new affordable housing sites. I'm guessing this is a priority of yours. Is it going to be yellow or is it going to be green? You can't decide. Let's see. I got 1, 2, 3, 4 yellow vote. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 yellows, and the remainder are green. Okay. Closing gaps. This would include all modes. So closing gaps in the transit system, closing gaps in your bikeways, closing gaps in your roadways where you might not have you might have pinches in capacity. We've got 1, 2 yellows, 1 red, and the rest are greens. It's our first red. We're going to come back to that. But that, they can't all be green. So some are going to have to be lower. Leveraging state and regional grant funds. This is using your local funds to leverage grant pots. Well, everyone loves that. It just means more to deal with. Okay, we got all greens there. Leverage away. Maintaining your existing infrastructure. So maintenance of what you have versus building something new. 1, 2, 3 yellows, and the rest are green. They're all great. We have only 1 red so far. Providing safe streets for all users. This gets into what you were talking about earlier, Director Navarez, about other non-motorized transportation as well, Vision Zero kinds of policies. Very important to everyone. Great. Reducing greenhouse gas emissions. And this could come from moving to transit. It could come to moving to non-motorized. It could come from more carpooling and van pooling, more transit use. It could come from a different mix of vehicles, but reducing greenhouse gas emissions. It is. This is the NVTA priorities. So it's however you bring your local sensibility to your NVTA role is the answer there. And to answer your question, Director Eisenberg, there's no right answer here. You won't be pilloried if this is not your highest priority. Well, you are absolutely correct, which is why if you are voting, if every time you pick up a card, you're picking up a green card, you're not really being honest with yourself, because not everything can be the highest priority. You're not going to be able to do everything equally. So moving on, schools and local travel needs. So these would be the emphasizing within your communities rather than the regional priorities. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 yellows. Pretty good split on that one. The rest are greens. And growing transit ridership. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 yellows, and the rest are greens. Okay, so now I will ask you Do you have a priority that was not included here, Director Nebrith? Collaboration with other agencies. That's a really good one. Yes, we are. Can I see your cards for collaboration with other agencies? One yellow, everyone else is green. Great. Did we miss anything? Anything else that we missed that's a priority of yours that you wish the agency did more of? Well, I think it's a subset of active transportation because active transportation includes walk and bike for all trip purposes, but certainly most of those trips would be local, and school trips would be a significant part of that, but not all of it. Could be its own set of priorities. So increasing the use of active transportation. Let's see cards for that. Increasing the use of active transportation.
Can I just say that some of these are overlapping?
They are.
I mean, active transportation, access to transit. I mean, there's multiple things that's going to reduce greenhouse gas.
That's right.
Access to transportation is access to transportation, whether it be for new affordable housing or travel needs. So there's a lot of overlap among these.
There is, and we'll sort that through. I have one yellow and everyone else was green on that. Okay. Now, some of you held up all greens. Yes. That's, yeah.
To reflect that number, should have something to say improve transportation, because it's schools and local travel needs, which should be employment travel needs. And I know that that's something we've all tried to figure out countywide, but it should be somewhere there. And I don't know if it's overlapping with something else, but somewhere.
So something that would specifically
community.
address access to jobs.
Yeah, or community needs. I mean, 77% of people work in, that number is really high. How many
It is
of those
really high.
numbers are single occupancy vehicles, right? So.
Mm-hmm.
That's price for that is, the data's here.
You're right. I think that within the the schools and local travel needs, I think that it is included as certainly as a local travel need within the travel within the county. But I think you're right about the need possibly to call that out separately.
Where the shopping centers, right, where you're seeing a lot of activity. That's different than community to work. Right? This data is specifically to work, or local needs may be going to the shopping center.
Right.
So you should really separate those two, because those are different needs.
So addressing the commute to work specifically.
Work, all lumped into shoppers and workers, right? But how do you address the workers and
Right. And it's interesting because if you look at those top 10 destinations, I bet they correspond fairly closely with the top 10 employment centers in the county. Municipal, school, shopping centers, those are large generators of employment. Hospitals in the college are large generators of employment as well. But I agree and hear with what you're saying, which is to have work trips be a specific goal of the plan. Now, the only person who held up a red card, we're going to pick on you a little bit, Director McGee, not necessarily to justify the particular one, although you certainly can tell us about that, but why you chose to a red card.
Now I'm going to turn red. I was wearing my Yountville hat, and we are, you know, a
Reasonable.
very unique municipality. So my thoughts in closing the gaps are, I mean, we are currently working on those, and as we are developing the former school site and putting in workforce housing and looking at how we can bring policies forward in the coming 5 or so years to encourage employees that aren't going to have their own vehicles and will need transportation. The goal is that they'll be local workers. So the walkability, the biking, the golf carts, and the different kind of programs that we're looking within our town are not ones that it wasn't a priority to try to connect gaps outside of Yountville.
It's really to focus within the town and having, when we talk about 77% of Napa residents work within Napa, you'd like to see, or you're working towards having a very high percentage of people who live within Yountville work within Yountville.
We have, I think the number is like 1,300 people that come in to Yountville on a daily basis to work within the resorts and the wineries. So we are looking for actively to bring those people, to incentivize people to work in Yountville and to have homes in Yountville and to be able to walk. But that does mean we'll also need the transportation to get to medical needs and to get to Napa to do shopping. So.
For sure. Yes. Yep. Well, and transportation being a network, right? It is all interrelated. Of course it is. And so it is difficult to come up with distinct categories, but the flavor is a little bit different, right? And so that's how we sort through them.
That's something that we're all trying to figure out with our out there by the airport, being a traffic route. So they influence each other.
Well, and they absolutely influence each other. And when you think about it, then what is one of the primary contributors to fatalities in accidents is speed. And so you would want to slow traffic. Well, if you want to slow traffic, you may have more congestion. So yeah, it's absolutely interrelated. Sometimes they're in concert with one another and sometimes in conflict with one another. Yes, of course. Yep. Thank you. Okay, we're going to move to the next slide. These are the goals that are listed in your current CTP. And we just want to check in. We can use our red, yellow, and green cards, or we can just start by asking the question. These are the CTP goals from your current plan. Are they still your goals, or is there anything missing from these goals that we should be sure to add to the update? No.
Could I have an explanation number 5 and 6, kind of unpack those two?
I think I will ask staff to do that. Sure.
Minimizing the number 5. So minimize the energy and other resources required to move people and goods. So, what are the solutions to that? Transit, active transportation.
Yeah, are we talking about, when you talk about energy, are you
That's right.
talking about literal or figurative energy?
Cleaner fuels.
Cleaner fuels. Okay.
Yeah. And then number 6, did you ask about number 6?
Yeah, that the maintenance
prioritize-
facility that was been built since, or is that a new, just maintenance and all? and
Yeah,
all?
the maintenance of the existing system. So across the board, all transportation systems, including transit.
Do those still look like the right goals to you? Any of them? All of them?
Or the transition to clean energy. I think the minimize of energy just confuses me. So maybe it's the transition to clean energy. And other resources required to move people. Maybe that's what, maybe it's the wording. I don't know if I'm alone on that.
I think it also, it's like blending two concepts. Vehicle miles traveled, reducing that is kind of an objective, as well as switching to a non-fossil fuel energy. So it's almost like
It's almost
both-
two concepts is what
yeah,
you're
two
saying.
concepts that all lead towards ultimately reducing some congestion, but mainly clean air and greenhouse gas emission reductions.
So what I'm hearing is that number 5 really could be two separate goals. One is the reducing vehicle miles traveled as a goal, and the separate goal is to facilitate the transition to clean energy for the
So the
transportation
word
system.
that I
the
keep
opposite.
thinking about is sustainability, really. We want to capture sustainability in the work that we do. So we can come up with a language that better encapsulates the meaning of number 5.
Yeah, I would agree. It's almost like the goal's the same and there's just two strategies, less
Right.
fossil fuel and less miles.
Right. Director McKee.
Number 4, I don't see that promoting specifically as a goal of NVTA. Maybe support, address, accommodate. But I think the promotion of our economic stability.
Sounds like something your chambers of commerce would do.
Yeah, or visit Napa Valley or, yeah.
Yeah, I think what we were getting at there is the impacts of congestion associated with our economy, making sure that we're moving freight and moving people. And maybe we can find a better way of saying that. Because we
Support.
definitely have a role in ensuring that the economy is a good economy for sure.
Mm-hmm.
That's an environment, so considers want to come extend. So these, absolutely nothing against any of, I really like it. And number 5 with modification, because we really do want to reduce overall energy. Like 50 people on a bus is a whole lot better than 40 electric cars.
Yep. One of the things you're saying, which I think is really important, is really these things nest under each other, right? You've got the theme that says this is what we want to do, or the goal, this is what we want to do. And then the previous slide had the themes that said, okay, under this goal, are some of the ways you're going to accomplish that. Yep. I was just thinking that. I think that having that displayed that way might be very useful.
Question on number 6 again. The prioritization, the maintenance and rehabilitation of existing system. So what specifically are we talking about? And could rehabilitation be improvement of the existing system? Because I'd like to continue to improve our system. And
I think what that goal is getting at, correct me if I'm wrong, is maintaining what you have.
Yeah.
So it's
fix it first.
fix it first.
Fix it first. That's the idea behind it. So this was really born out of, measure T, measure U, kind of fix it first. And as mentioned again by Bonnie, it would not just be specific to streets and roads, but also then transit, like maintaining our current transit system, maintaining our equipment. This policy or this goal is around fix it first. So the previous board wanted to emphasize like a fix it first, maintaining the system. But that, I mean, obviously it's under this board's purview to keep that or change it, but that's the idea behind it.
I agree with if we can fix it first, but thank goodness the vision and the leadership of our executive director had to push through the new maintenance facility because we could not fix where we were, right? So there's points where you can't fix it and we need to look at improving. And so if we can compromise and we can change rehabilitation to improving the existing system. So we're always looking for that as our vision. That would be great.
I was thinking along the same lines, Liz, is modernization in there, and changing needs with the e-bike system now. We see, I have them passing me at 30 miles an hour on these throttled e-bikes, and they're on a bicycle trail. But that's a changing mode for, at least for the under 40 crowd. They're on, so I think in 20 years, how people travel again, it's going to change.
Mm-hmm. I like the modernization more than the improvement. I think that's great.
Got that? Great. Anything else? Yes.
For number 2, I just kind of, the framing is basically assuring safety, but I think it's a more positive framing if it's transportation as healthcare, right? Because then it's like good health outcomes as well as avoiding the worst ones, not just avoiding the worst ones. It's a little more positive and uplifting. Better goal.
Transportation as healthcare. That's very well put.
I was really mulling over number 2. And what I thought was, safety is important, but connectivity, because when you're on one road, you want to get somewhere else. Sometimes there's these spots where you don't want to cross, right? So if we're talking about all modes of transportation that serves all users of all ages, just like number 1 says, if you're not on a bus, but you're on a bike or you're walking, there's some areas where it's really difficult to cross, right? So I will look at number 2 to improve system safety and connectivity.
Okay.
I think we probably already do a fair amount of what I'm going to say, but it doesn't seem as explicit as I would want it to be. And that is, I think many of these goals that we have just inherently involve the private sector. They inherently involve our medical facilities, our nonprofits, our schools. And so it seems to me that we do this, but it would be nice to have a goal that says that we are connecting and building partnerships and working with and trying to find solutions from the private sector. Because my first reaction is, maybe no one else has this reaction, is how presumptuous of us, this body, to think that we are going to tackle all of these things without that essential factor, the rest of the community. I think the best ideas, the biggest ideas come from folks who are in it every day, employers, folks who are doing medicine, educating our public. And so I know we connect with them, obviously, but it may be important to have a more explicit recognition of that. Thank you.
I think it's a great idea, actually. An explicit goal for having partnerships not only with the private sector, but also with the other public agencies, which we've talked about a lot, the need to partner with your local jurisdictions, and having that as an explicit goal that's a part of the plan might be a good step towards better cooperation too.
I think it's almost including the stakeholder. Yeah, it's kind of a stakeholders. It's not just the private sector, but all the stakeholders to our transit system.
I see a lot of nodding heads. So that's great. You got that. We got that, Ashley. I can see that. I can see it either way. Yeah, you can flash them up. Well, I am about done, actually. Is there anything else as you're looking over these goals and had a chance to think and process them, whether there's anything? I realize that many of you are new or newish to the board. And so these goals, which are part of the current countywide transportation plan, are not necessarily your goals. And this is your opportunity to write the goals and form that great base on which everything else gets built. Yes.
I think the only other thing, often when you have goals, you have the other side of it, which is measurable outcomes.
Mhm.
And so maybe that doesn't have to be a goal to have measurable outcomes, but I do hope someplace in the, CTP, it talks about having measurable outcomes so we can see if we're moving the needle at all.
Yes,
Yeah,
absolutely.
Thank you for bringing that up, because this last CTP was the very first time that we included performance metrics. And as you might recall, we did a mid-plan performance metrics review. Certainly nobody expected we were going to, bump into a pandemic during the course of all of this measuring and monitoring. So, that got a little wonky. We're going to be taking a look as we walk through this process with all of you over the course of this next year. Do those metrics. We didn't want to dive into that today, but that is something that we are going to hit and dive into with you. Do those need adjustment? Do they need changes? How are we going to track this over time and make sure we're achieving these goals?
Thank you.
Okay.
Can we please open this floor for suggestions from the professionals behind us?
Absolutely.
Good point. We were going to have a public comment. So if our speakers are done, then I would certainly encourage anybody behind us to line up and make their comments and suggestions. Yeah, we'll share our. We're lovable people, and we won't say anything untoward, probably.
Handout. Okay. Sherry has a handout for us.
Who do I give it to?
I would be happy to take it. Would you like to tell everyone what it is?
Yes. Give me one copy. Which one? So who's that?
This is my first meeting here. I serve as on the advisory committee for the last 10 years, and this is truly exciting. Okay. The amount of scientific data that's been collected and the ability to get it done is, to me, as a researcher, very exciting. But I'm wondering if it's possible that much of the data that's been collected, can that be drilled down into the local area? Much of what we have gotten is Napa County. Us people in the Upper Valley, we think we're a little bit different than the rest of Napa County. And we'd like some stats that tell us that. I'm particularly, my interest is in housing as a housing developer. And we need to know, do we need to build more housing with what's taking place recently with the reconstruction of our construction industry and the amount of people that are no longer working in our area? We have some large questions. Do we still need housing? And if we do, what type of housing should that be? So my basic question is it possible from the data that you have, can that be moved down to the local level and make that available to the rest of us?
Okay.
each jurisdiction is told by the state gives us the regional housing numbers, and then those get distributed to the counties, and then the counties sort of work together, the municipalities and the county work together to distribute them in county. So your housing numbers in Calistoga your targets are already established, and then the jurisdiction can decide whether or not they want to build more housing and what that housing looks like in terms of their zoning rules. So it's this totally outside sort of the purview of NVTA. So what? Oh, do you want?
Yeah.
I guess.
I think the question is, could we take the data we saw tonight and break it out, at the sub-county level, jurisdictional or area?
Yes.
Is that what you're
Will that-
interested in, Larry? The travel behavior? Okay, sorry. I thought you were talking about housing.
Yeah. Because I think in
housing in their area, or are they coming in, or are they going out?
Okay, so our when the travel behavior study is done, we will have the numbers of who is traveling from what jurisdiction to another and who is coming from out of the county to each jurisdiction. So we will have those numbers, yes.
Excellent.
Uh-huh.
Thank you.
Okay, I guess I'm next on the list. A lot of you know me, Mike Setti from Napa. One of the concerns that myself and another fellow have had is I see the importance of goal number 4. One of the things that I'm surprised in Napa that we're not also talking about, preserving the good things that we have in this valley, like the ag preserve and the whole scene, if you will. So the person my partner on this project is a fellow named Lance Burris, who actually was involved in a lot of big development projects in his prime. But we were concerned about what other steps can we do to help preserve the valley despite whatever economic earthquakes or tidal waves that we present. Currently, of course, everybody knows let's face it, the wine industry is in a recession right now, but we don't want people to say, oh, well, no more wine, therefore let's develop it into something else. So Lance and I have come up with a 2-part proposal here that I think is input at an opportune time with this transportation plan being updated. And I would say just as importantly, the county general plan, which it all seems to dovetail right now. So anyway, I have handouts, staff has it, regarding a concept called the Napa Valley Reserve, which sort of similar in concept to perhaps the Adirondack Park in New York, where there is an overall legal structure for preserving the area, even though people, it's an active area that just had, I guess the best analogy I could think is like some of the, things we already do actually, and, just strengthen them at the regional and state levels. And the other thing is the orange, I should say the canary yellow paper is regarding the rail proposals, what we're calling Napa Valley Link, NV Link. Some of our ideas for what maybe can added to the discussion when your consultants get around to actually doing a real study. The last time this occurred was in 2003, which in my opinion, somebody that has almost 50 years in the business, and I think Hans Corby might agree with me, we were disappointed by the outcome of that study. And we're trying to update something to the effect of what we think the tourist industry can do and also service for locals. One thing that's different about here is we do have the tourist market, and they've shown a willingness to pay significant prices for the experience of riding a train through the Napa Valley. Our concern is with the wine train does well, but at $200 to $300 to $800 a trip, we're talking about, you know, the top 5% of the even the Napa Valley market, and we need to democratize that to where it's more affordable, as well as giving the locals a break on the price. Anyway, if you could hand that out, I'd appreciate it.
Yeah, hello, Hans Corvey, Vice Chair of the CAC. One of the things that I didn't see on the CTP 2045 goals and is to develop a multimodal system for the county, a system that allows one to and provides for complete mobility options without having to own a car. And this is very much what other places, and you know, I'm very familiar with what Central Europe does, specifically Germany, where you can live no matter what, you know, what size community without ever having to own a car. You know, for example, where I'm from, my town, it has got 10,000 people. You don't need a car. Everywhere you go from rail, which Napa doesn't have, which it should have, to bus, to demand responsive vehicle, whatever it is. And you never have to worry about having to own a car. You also don't have to worry about schedule. You just know that your system is, let's say the train comes at the 14 hour, every hour or every 30 minutes. Therefore, all the buses will serve that, and therefore all the demand responsive vehicles will serve the bus. You know, it's a very simple thing, you know, no complicated schedule, and you just live that way. And that's something, you know, given we're looking at a you know, goal for the next 20, 30 years, that'll be something we can really look forward to and have a transformational transportation system in the county in the future that allows all of us to exist without a car, without worrying about whether it's a million electric vehicles that we don't have enough electricity to charge them, et cetera, et cetera. Let's look at learning from other jurisdictions and come up with a way to give us complete mobility, modal options without, like, getting here. What are the options of getting here other than by car? And not very good. And that should not be the future. I hope the next meeting we have, we can get here without thinking about how we get there. So that's to me the real transformation that we can take. And Napa is the size where you could become the poster child for how the Bay Area can do it. And I think within even MTC, there's beginning to be support for things like that. And don't forget, in the future, there'll be the effort for the 2026 probably sales tax measure for some of the counties, not Napa, to increase the sales tax to provide transit, to provide BART, Muni, and all that, some money to sustain their operation. That measure will have significant hooks with that, which will require some of the things I'm talking about. So we have a chance to transform eventually the entire Bay Area, how it operates. So I just see this right now as a huge opportunity that we got to try to take advantage of for our piece of it.
Good afternoon. Thank you. Michael Baldini. I'm chair of the Citizens Advisory Committee for Napa Valley Transportation Authority. I'm blessed to work with these folks here, and Ashley and Hans and Gary and Larry and quite a few others. They've got the experience. And what I want to mention is, and what has been said, Mayor Sledgley mentioned the e-bikes and so on and so forth. We've gone from Sears catalog days to Amazon. And with that, I saw 20 trucks leaving this area, going out throughout the area. and goods and services, very important, but visionary and also in maintaining those rights of way, short of annexing Vallejo and maintaining those right of ways to the ferry and also down to what was formerly General Mills, is as I also see that we must integrate the planning with that, putting houses right up next to that right of way throughout the rail right of way. We're just shooting ourselves in the foot as far as being able to run a viable transportation system that complements not only our tourism business, but also the goods and services that are provided as an alternative to rail. Why shouldn't a warehouse also have a rail option so to get those trucks off the highway or some other way? We used to move garbage by train, but I think that was contentious. Let's move it someplace else. But just look at those options, visionary, and who knows what will be next. But hopefully in a better place. So thank you very much.
My name is Lyle Abbott. I'm, excuse me, the VP of the PCC. I'm also a homeless person. So in my mind, it's just, I don't know, just crazy to me to not have some kind of public transportation near low-income housing. There's a lot of places that it's like, how can I afford a car? I can't afford a car with my income. So I need public transportation. Yes, I can still walk. I'm not handicapped yet, but maybe in the future I will be. So that's just one thing. Access to hospitals, healthcare, banks, churches. There's a whole list of things that people want to be able to get to. I've also noticed that travel from east to west side of Napa is not very good right now. North and south is pretty good, but there's some areas in the northern Napa that is not covered at all. So it's like, I think we could have 20 more routes, and they could be probably well ridden if we just had them. And the advertising that they are there and they're available so that you can go from here to there and you know that you can do it because that's where you need to go for either the job, for groceries, whatever it is, for clothing. The needs are there, but there has to be the transportation to earn the money. If you can get the job. I just I couldn't continue to work for Amazon in their hub down in American Canyon because I didn't have public transportation. And for those hours that I was working, that's whole nother aspect to the ball game. Longer hours, longer bus routes. That's all something that here again is, I know, a cost issue. But that may be something that needs to be looked at, is extending the hours, especially in the evening, to certain areas.
Right. I think we've got all the public comment we're going to get. Oh. No.
I usually say something, I guess. Gary Woodruff, I live here in Napa and the Valley since I was born, pretty much. Anyway, one thing that I've noticed between Europe, whether it's England or
other parts of, large portions of Europe, they've always, mainly because the cities are very small and very condensed, bringing cars and things into narrow streets are pretty much impossible many times. But what they've done is they've always provided general parking areas for the people that either work in the cities or people that are coming to visit the cities or to shop. And then there's a very intense busing system that'll bring, buses will stop every 5 minutes and just bring people into the center of the city and then bring them out. That's been very successful in Oxford. If you've ever been to Oxford, and you pay, I think it's $2, or that time it was like a pound to park your car, and then you just hopped on the free bus, went into town, came back out. If we looked at that as the valley as a whole, as a employer, you might say, I traveled out of the valley every day for probably 25, 30 years and watching all the traffic coming into Napa. It hasn't really changed. Sometimes there's single people in cars. Many times it's multiple people in the car, but they're all going to do certain types of jobs and positions, whether it's in the wine industry, working as cellar, whether it's working in restaurants that open at 10 o'clock or 12. But there's certain amounts of people that are flowing into this valley all day long for work because they can't afford here, but that's a different issue. And if we could somehow provide a better coordinated effort, whether it's train or whether it's different shuttle buses that run to certain points, then turn around and come back. So then you can sort of layer your demand for people going to certain areas. There's like a Calistoga zone, there's a St. Helena zone, there's a Yountville zone. So then those buses leave at certain times to get the people out of their cars. We're certainly not going to be able to improve the volume of widening the highways and those types of things. I mean, I experience it every day when I go to St. Helena, which has my favorite film movie house. Coming back at different times, it's nothing but just clogged traffic with one person in a car. 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock, whatever. It's just packed. And we haven't done a good job trying to incentivize people to try to you have to have the structure so people will use it, number one. But number two, you have to build the incentives by working with employers. There's surge times during the fall when we have crush, large wineries that do all the production work up valley. So do they start at 6 a.m? Do they start at 7? Can't we, offer carpooling to get them off the roads? And it'll provide them a better work environment. They don't get stuck in traffic for an hour or 35, 45 minutes. Anyway, that's what I have to say.
Thank you. All right, last call. Then I believe that's, is there any final notes or? We have one more.
So we really appreciate the time that you invested in all of this today. This was a lot of information. We got a lot of great feedback from all of you and everybody in the room. So thank you for that. You will see us again at the next board meeting. We'll bring back some revised form of the goals for the Countywide Transportation Plan. Today was more for your information and brainstorming towards how we're going to approach this moving forward so that we do have a next generation system that works for everybody out into the future. Any specific final comments or words for any of the topics that you see up here? Yeah.
The only thing I want to add is, and this might likely is already happening, is that just as the city completed their general plan, which is really exceptional, I think that they were recognized award-winning for their general plan, and the counties in the pursuit of that, is that NVTA as a partner agency knows and has input and is working together with all the jurisdictional general plans. So it's interweaved with each other.
Yeah, back to, I think Kate and Daniel both had that comment early on about, our technical advisories should include the planning teams, and we're going to make a much more concerted effort to meet with them and have that relationship back and forth like we used to ensure that we're coordinated between those two efforts. Yeah. Oh, yeah. We've actually already been in touch with the county as they're getting ready to approach the update of their countywide general plan. We're out a little bit in front of their effort. We are definitely hoping to coordinate between the two. For instance, if they have an outreach or public event, we're going to participate in that. And we hope that that will happen vice versa. When we have communications with the community and with all of you, that those efforts are coordinated. As you can see from all the information today, we can't sit in our silos to do this. It's going to take everybody and some great coordination moving forward. And we're looking forward to doing that. Robin?
Just in listening to the comments in the back, it just seems to me that we have two type of transportation needs in the valley. If we're going to reduce congestion and greenhouse emissions, so we have the visitor needs, and then we also have the local staffing needs, different times of day, and the visitors are going to that we have here are more into luxury. So what if we had transportation through the late morning and into early evening between our towns and cities that were smaller electric buses, that were more ones that our hotels and resorts would encourage, and then buses alongside that for early morning and like that 7 to 3:30 shift, and then the 3:30 to 11 o'clock shift. So it's a total different type of transportation need, but serving both that sit on Highway 29 in the congestion.
Well, are you suggesting we'd have like separate systems, one for visitors and one? Okay, so it's a really interesting idea, but we would be at least under the current regulations of the federal government, it would not be allowed because we need to, if we're using public resources, we need to allow everybody to be on the bus. So, but that doesn't mean we can't try to work with the private sector to find resources to do something like that. It's just something that we couldn't contribute any public money to.
Okay. Okay.
I think that's it.
All right. Well, a couple of things. It's 10 minutes earlier than we thought, so good for us. And I'd like to thank everyone, the presenters, our staff, for putting on an excellent retreat. Kudos to the food as well and this room. So thank you all very much. For the board, we do have hopefully a short closed session. So I don't think we're going to be here. I think we're moving off somewhere so people, well, I think we all.
You're staying here.
Unless they've cleaned the room up and we can just.
Stay here.
Okay, then we are staying here. So other than if you wanted to take a quick break, we'll reconvene in 10 minutes.